Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports presented by Prize Picks. Final mock draft Monday of the cycle, and boy am I excited for it. We're going to be talking about both rounds here in the 2026 NBA draft. I know a lot of you have been asking for full 2-round mock drafts, so I had to deliver here for the final mock draft Monday of the cycle. We'll of course include mock trades as well. I featured them last week, and I have a couple of new ones, some tweaks to previous ones. It's going to be a lot of fun in today's video talking about those trades. And then, of course, a reminder too, I'm going to be live on the channel the entire day of the draft for the most part. I'll be live for several hours before the draft. We'll be talking NBA draft prospects. We'll look at possible outcomes, maybe play around with the mock draft simulator a little bit, just run some simulations, have some fun. We'll look at trade scenarios. We'll do a whole lot more as well that day. And of course, reading all of your guys' comments, which I do for all of the videos too. So make sure to leave a comment down below, whether it's just something chill and nice about the 2026 draft class as a whole, something you've enjoyed about this draft cycle, maybe something you've enjoyed about the content here at Utility Sports. Just let me know down in the comment section below how you're doing today, what you're looking forward to, and if you enjoyed the video. And you guys know what to do if you do. Smash that like button and subscribe. But let's jump into it here now with the first overall pick, the Washington Wizards. Now, with me planning to cover the entirety of the draft, all 60 picks, the brevity of the picks will be a little bit different. I'm still trying to provide my normal content to its fullest extent, so I'm not going to just fly through all of these picks. I know some people like the 15-20 minute mock drafts. I just think it leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of the actual analysis and my role in it. So we're going to probably find ourselves in a pretty decent time slot here. But again, I hope you guys do enjoy. And first overall, I have the Washington Wizards. Again, this has been a tough decision for me since the night of the lottery. I've said multiple times I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Sounds like there's a lot of noise and rumors right now about Darryn Peterson or Dybantsa. Very likely one of them will be the selection. Cam Boozer has also visited Washington. So the Wizards have done their due diligence. And with this selection, I have them selecting forward Dybantsa from BYU. I have stuck with him up to the very final buzzer here for my mock drafts. He has been the first overall selection in all of my mock drafts, but again, that does not come with complete and utter confidence like it did with Cooper Flagg in the 2025 draft, like it did with Victor Wembanyama in the 2023 draft. And I think there's actually a lot of parallels to the Jabari Smith Jr., Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero discussion that we saw a few draft classes ago, where there was noise and speculation about who the pick was going to be. A lot of people had assumed going into the day of the draft that it was going to be Jabari Smith Jr., who heard his name called first overall. And then Orlando pivoted and drafted Paolo Banchero. Funny enough, Chet Holmgren was seemingly never the primary candidate for them to take, despite probably having the best career so far among all three of those guys. And Washington, it seems like for the most part here, they have gone back and forth between Dybantsa and Peterson. It'll be interesting to see if history repeats itself with Cam Boozer potentially just being the best of the trio when it's all said and done anyway, kind of like the Holmgren situation. But AJ is such a great pickup here for Washington. I think there's a lot of things that we can kind of lean on from the 2025 draft with all of the speculation that Ace Bailey was the player the Wizards wanted to draft. Of course, they took Trey Johnson. I think they're still very happy with that selection. Trey Johnson's a heck of a young player. But you can look at the positional size, the athletic tools that Ace Bailey possesses, and then you extrapolate them to who Dybantsa is, and you say, wow, that's an even better prospect. He's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, more fluid, more functional athletically around the rim. He's a way better rim finisher. And oh, by the way, his self-creation tools are all significantly off the charts in comparison to Ace Bailey, which is why Dybantsa is a far better prospect than Ace Bailey. And I'm not saying that to upset Utah Jazz fans. Ace Bailey's a solid player. I think he's going to have a solid NBA career ahead of him. But Dybantsa is a player with a really high floor coming into this draft class. He's got great athletic tools and obviously the ability to put the ball on the deck and get to the rim, shoot it very effectively once he gets to the rim. He's going to get to the charity stripe more than probably anyone else in the entire 2026 draft class. And all of those reasons is why Washington feels very comfortable with his floor being very high and that the outcomes for him in DC are going to all be, for the most part, very, very good. There will be some questions about how they go about team building. Trae Young opted out of his player option. And remember, AJ Dybantsa wanted the number 3. Maybe this is his pathway of getting it there in Washington. We'll see. But AJ Dybantsa goes first overall in my final 2026 NBA mock draft, which now pushes us over to the Utah Jazz. And while a lot of the discussion around the first overall pick is inherently between AJ Dybantsa and Darryn Peterson, the discussion between pick 2 isn't just a foregone conclusion either. Then with one of the two off the board, I still think Utah is going to go through their process very firmly. We've known that they've done that. They've worked out a bunch of different players, even down the board a little bit further from pick number 2 than maybe you'd even expect with their selection. So they've done their due diligence. They put a lot of time in. Obviously, they have Carlos Boozer as a part of the organization internally in the scouting role. So there's going to be obviously some voices in that Jazz front office and organization that are going to voice their support for Cam Boozer. But second overall in my final 2026 mock draft, I have the Utah Jazz selecting guard Darryn Peterson from Kansas. Right now there is a lot of speculation and concern and rumors about Walker Kessler not having an extension done in place, with Utah not liking the contract that's been on the table from the Jazz camp. Now, I think he's a super integral part of what they want to get done going forward, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And part of why I like the Darryn Peterson selection here for Utah is his defensive ability. I think he's a very, very smart team defender. Now, for the most part, he does have a tendency of ball watching, but it's because he's very impactful while watching the basketball. He does a really great job getting in the passing lanes. As a guard, he's one of the best shot blockers we've had in the last 5 or 10 drafts. Now, obviously, he's dealt with some physical stuff while he was at Kansas that limited him in some extent, about the cramping and the creatine, all that kind of stuff. That, of course, is a concern that limited him and kind of changed the tape a little bit. But when he was out there, he was very, very productive, very good. And I think just in general for Utah, if they're going to be a good team, they need to build a great team defense. They ranked 29th in the NBA this past year in team defensive rating. Again, they didn't have Walker Kessler for a majority of the season, so that hurts. They acquired Jaren Jackson Jr. at the trade deadline and then shut him down shortly after. That will also help. But if you add Darryn Peterson into the mix, you're getting another player who can really help you defensively. I think he's a very easy offensive fit there for the Jazz as well. And ultimately, a really nice selection for Utah with the second overall pick. Pick number 3, the Memphis Grizzlies on the clock now. And kind of like clockwork, the Memphis Grizzlies third overall select forward Cam Boozer from Duke. Not only is this an organization that tends to really value the analytical mindset of draft evaluation to begin with. You think back to the Zach Edey draft pick. Cedric Coward obviously had some interesting analytical propositions, plus all the physical length, tool, and size to boot. And then Cam Boozer is, of course, the kind of head honcho of all of that. He is an unbelievable prospect, but I also think just a really great eye test prospect too. Someone who can diagnose, process, read the floor. In a lot of ways, he's a supercomputer in a huge, strong, big power forward's body. And those two things meshed together make him one of the more unique prospects we've had in recent NBA draft history. And it's very exciting for his NBA career. There's possibilities and pathways where maybe he slims down a little bit, adds back in a little bit of fluidity and mobility and quickness, or he can continue to play at 240 plus, 250-ish pounds, be extremely strong, be a physical mismatch that a lot of teams aren't equipped with. And then if you put him next to a 7'3" Zach Edey, who is also, I think, a physical behemoth and an outlier, all of a sudden there's not a lot of front offices that are equipped with their organizational built in a way that is going to be able to deal with a 6'9", 250-pound power forward and a 7'3", 300-pound center. Like, it's just, there's not a lot of teams that have the size, the length, rim protection, and the combination of all of those things to actually deal with this front court. Plus the fact that Boozer can shoot it, he can pass it. All of the comparisons early in the year to Marvin Bagley were some of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Marvin Bagley in college was not a facilitator and didn't shoot. Cam Boozer shot it at over 39% from 3. He gets fouled a ton. The floor for this guy is super high, not only in terms of his own individual impact and outcomes, but also for team building. you get this guy on your roster, it's really easy to put a team around him because you're really just looking for good players. I think he can fit with any kind of talent. Another stretch big man, great. An inside big, great. Put him next to a high-volume pick-and-roll guard, great. He's awesome in the short roll. Put him next to kind of off-ball hybrid wing players like a Cedric Howard already, great. That's going to be very good for him. He was table-setting Dame Sarr this past year. I think Cedric Howard's going to feel like a real blessing. And funny enough, a year ago, a lot of people were expecting Cedric Howard to be his teammate at Duke, and now history might have it that they are teammates there in Memphis instead. So kind of a little fun story to monitor as well, if the Grizzlies are lucky enough to have Cam Boozer on their roster after Tuesday night this week. Pick number 4, the Chicago Bulls now on the board. And for Chicago, we have maintained pretty much the entirety of the draft cycle after the lottery, who they will take here 4th overall. And it's a perfect option for them, with Bryson Graham coming in and really emphasizing slap with size, length, athleticism, and physicality. To be able to be in a spot here where 4th overall, for the most part, tends to feel like a little bit more of a consolation prize than anything. Walking away with this caliber of prospect with the upside and the super high floor because of the defensive traits and the athletic tools that he possesses, there's really, I don't think, any world where he's not a producer in the NBA to some extent. And 4th overall, that player is, of course, Caleb Wilson from UNC. I think offensively, there's a lot of stuff that Chicago's going to be able to give him a runway toward developing with the ball in his hands more frequently, running a higher dose of ball screen action than he did at UNC for Hubert Davis, who was on the hot seat for stretches of that season in North Carolina. And, of course, we know how that ended for Hubert Davis. And I think for Caleb Wilson, not only is he going to be given those opportunities to make mistakes, play through those mistakes as the Bulls are undergoing a full-fledged rebuild. Finally, after the Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan era of Bulls basketball, which I'm sure a lot of Chicago fans wish they could just wipe from their memory in general, I think Caleb's going to be an awesome player for them to give opportunities to. I think the fans are going to really get behind him, root for him, live through his mistakes, and look forward to the future where maybe the mistakes start to dwindle and all of the skills start to come together. And, of course, with the athleticism, that's going to be really awesome. I think back to Giannis Antetokounmpo, not that this is a fair comparison at all, and that's not what I'm trying to say, but one of the best things about Giannis's rookie season with Milwaukee, their season kind of went awry pretty early on. They were able to get him on the floor, give him opportunities, put the ball in his hands, and then Jason Kidd oversaw a lot of the development for him, having the basketball in his hands, driving it, being a point forward type. And you think about Thiago Splitter, the Bulls' new head coach, he just oversaw that kind of role for Denny Avdia, where Avdia had the ball in his hands more than he ever had this past year, became an all-star for the first time ever. And I think there's a lot of hope for Chicago that maybe Caleb Wilson can be that next protege of a player who isn't traditionally viewed as a point guard and more of a long, big, athletic forward who gets the ball put in his hands and then can make plays off the bounce with continued emphasis and focus on his skill development year over year. We have a trade to announce here in the mock draft, a trade that we talked about last week, and I really liked it, so I wanted to keep it in the mock video today. The Sacramento Kings jump above Brooklyn, and they move up to the 5th overall pick in a trade with the Clippers. There's been a lot of reporting about Sacramento's desire for a specific prospect, and there's also been a lot of noise about the Clippers being willing to move down. I thought this was a pretty strong offer for them. They get pick number 7 back, so they slide just down 2 spots in the overall draft, which probably means they're still going to be able to get the guy they wanted anyway. They get pick number 34, so a very early second rounder in this draft class, which could deliver them another good young player. And then they get that Spurs pick, which is number 1 through 15, so it's another first-round pick at their disposal with a backup protection into a multitude of second-rounders. So a pretty strong offer here where the Clippers get a bunch of draft flexibility. They essentially are still going to get the guy that they want, even at a cheaper cap hit. And the Kings don't play any funny business. They don't risk losing their guy to Brooklyn or the Clippers in front of them, and they just go up aggressively, move up to this 5th overall pick so that they can, of course, you guessed it, select guard Darius Acuff Jr. Not only do the Kings seemingly want Darius Acuff Jr., but Darius Acuff Jr. and his camp reportedly very much want the Kings. And I think this is a really great opportunity for him to step into an NBA role immediately where he is the face of the franchise very quickly on. Domantas Sabonis, a great player, multi-time All-Star, All-NBA caliber-ish big man. Obviously, Zach LaVine's had a productive career scoring the ball. DeMar DeRozan's had a great career for himself individually, but I don't think there'd be any questions asked about who the face of the franchise is long-term the moment Darius Acuff Jr. shows up to the arena. And that's a great thing for Sacramento, and I also think one thing that's really good for this organization, and it's been very dysfunctional, the ownership's been, I think, over-involved. The management has been, for the most part over the last 20 years, bad. I think one thing about Darius Acuff Jr., he's going to be one of those players that makes everyone around him better. He's an elevator of talent. I think he's a real floor raiser for an organization. You have this guy on the floor, he's going to create good shots for others. He's going to draw attention, and he's going to be able to put the ball in the basket to a decent extent. He's going to be a really nice kind of centerpiece and chess piece for a team because he's going to dictate the way that you play. And it's an easy style to build around because you have a high-volume pick-and-roll point guard who doesn't need ball screens all of the time. He's going to influence your transition play. So you put shooting around him, you put athleticism around him, you put play finishing around him, and it just allows you to go get solid players all over the floor. You're obviously going to need some defensive-minded players. I'm not sure if a Darius Acuff Jr. Maxime Reynaud pairing is ever going to be super functional in the NBA, but right now the Kings need to be looking at themselves as a completely blank canvas. This team was trying to win this past year and mustered up less than 25 wins for a reason. This Kings roster is not very good. They don't have any super young players. They don't have any teenagers on their roster right now. You draft Darius Acuff Jr., and then you turn your eyes toward the next 2, 3, 4 drafts and trying to plan around him, build around him, and then before his rookie contract ends, you go into free agency and try and add 2 or 3 winning pieces that can really help him as he kind of grows and gets into his second contract in the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets now at 6 maybe got sniped by the Kings with Sacramento jumping in front of them. There is some noise right now that Brooklyn would at least have some interest in Darius Acuff Jr. I know a lot of Nets fans are going to say, well, Sean Marks wouldn't draft a small guard. I mean, yeah, you say that until he does. But 6th overall here, I have Brooklyn now with Acuff off the board, selecting guard Keaton Wagler out of Illinois. So I do follow suit with what you might have been telling me in the comment section and have them take a tall guard. 6'5" without shoes on. Keaton Wagler has a really unique blend of craft, creativity, shot-making talent, and the ability to create meaningful separation. People are going to say, oh, he doesn't have the best athletic traits. He doesn't finish above the rim. They'll say that, oh, his burst isn't great. Yet he was able to get his shot off super routinely, super consistently in a very strong conference in the Big Ten against a lot of size and playing in a very slow-paced environment. And you would think, despite all of that, if he's not the fastest, best burst player, he would have a hard time creating shots. But you look at the actual numbers, you look at the film, he was one of the best self-creators across all of Division I college basketball this past season. And that's what Brooklyn is betting on here. Last draft, they went out and took a whole bunch of players who can create for others a little bit, have some nice positional feel and playmaking juice, guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot to a certain extent. All of that stuff super valuable, but they need a guy who can be kind of the lead initiator for their team, someone who's super comfortable with the ball in his hands, can win off the perimeter, can get into the paint, and then score it from there. He's got a really great deceleration step, I think very good body control, and while, yeah, he's probably not the fastest guy in the gym, he's going to be someone who's always on balance, has, I think, a really good kind of nature of playing slow to fast and then fast back to slow, and I think all of that's going to help him translate pretty well into his NBA career. He finished top 10 on my final big board. I do like his game. I think there's still a lot for him to continue building upon. I do think he has to get a little bit stronger to be more functional as a driver even, especially against NBA athletes. But for the most part, I think the semblance is there of a very, very good on-ball player who can, at the very least, run your offense, initiate stuff for you, but secondly has the upside to turn into a really dynamic shot maker off the bounce as well. Pick 7. The Los Angeles Clippers now on the clock. Of course, they moved down from number 5 with that Kings trade we just talked about here a couple of minutes ago. And at 7, I have the LA Clippers selecting guard Mikel Brown Jr. from Louisville. And there's a lot of noise about Steve Ballmer and his fascination with Mikel Brown Jr. leading up to the draft here. I think that these two have been linked together quite a bit. And obviously, in my mock drafts, not only are we trying to talk about possibilities and likely outcomes, but we're also trying to follow the reporting and best predict what will actually happen. And I feel like for the Clippers here, when there's smoke, there's at least a decent amount of fire or possibility of fire. And with all of what I've seen, all of what I've read, and everything that kind of points for who the Clippers would look to circle and target and highlight for this draft class, Mikel Brown Jr. is the guy that makes a lot of sense, because not only is he a player who I perceive to have a ton of possible upside with kind of a golden ticket option here for the Clippers with this pick that they got from Indiana, the ability to go out and maybe hit a home run with this selection would be huge for them, but also someone who I think would be a functional fit onto their roster. If they do keep Darius Garland, I think Mikel Brown Jr. probably can coexist next to him a little bit smoother and easier than somebody like what we saw with maybe Acuff or with Kingston Flemings. Like, the size I think is important. The athletic traits are important here. Mikel Brown's obviously a pretty solid athlete who finished at the rim quite well despite it being on low volume. He gets to the free throw line a lot. And I think for LA, I think there's a lot of interest in hitting on this pick in a big way, but also having someone who has kind of a lot of those functional physical traits that they're looking for in a possible long-term franchise point guard. And with Brown's ability to shoot it from deep, create off the dribble, and then create for others, where he had a very high assist rate this past year, there's a lot of intrigue around the league, but especially from the Clippers front office at this point in time. And I think specifically his defensive intangibles and kind of hand-eye coordination for the basketball and defense is a huge thing for them as well. Pick 8, the Atlanta Hawks now on the clock here. And for Atlanta, I really went back and forth a lot. There's a couple of guards who I think make a lot of sense, and then, of course, all of the speculation about Aday. And if they do take Aday, I absolutely love that selection. I do think he'd be very nice for them next to Dyson Daniels. I think there's a lot of synergy between those two players on both ends of the floor. But we're not going to spend more time talking about that in this mock draft, because 8th overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting guard Kingston Flemings from Houston. Now, on Sunday, they did sign CJ McCollum to a 1-year, $21 million contract. So they have at least a creator in the room, in the building, around Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels. And does that point to what Atlanta might be wanting to do in the draft? I don't really think so, because you, again, look at that from a whole view and say, okay, if they were planning on CJ McCollum to dictate who they would pick 8th overall, that would be, I think, a bad way of running a franchise, especially if you're only signing him to a 1-year contract that had a trade kicker. I think that's a little telling as well about Atlanta wanting to have optionality. And, of course, CJ McCollum and his camp may be having a little bit of concern about getting traded on a 1-year contract. So Kingston Flemings here is the long-term solution for the Hawks after trading away Trae Young to DC before the deadline this year, coming out and finding a guard, albeit another small one. This one has more compete factor on defense. He's a very good athlete, just a functionally way better defender than Trae Young. And I think a lot of people tend to boil everything down to just pure physical traits and size. There's so much that goes into defense. It's the want to, it's the actual functional talent defensively with the technique, footwork, the court processing, understanding where you're supposed to be when and why you're supposed to be there, and then the activity level in those spots. There's so many things about defense. Hand activity, eye-hand coordination is a huge thing. Like, there's just so many things that really matter. And I think Kingston Flemings obviously has that want to compete on defense, and he has a lot of micro characteristics that have helped him compete on that end of the floor. He's still going to get targeted and hunted a little bit because of his size. That's just going to be the nature of the beast for him. But offensively, he's very skilled. And I think for Quinn Snyder, this is a really nice long-term safety valve for easy offense for Atlanta with his ability to win off the perimeter. He's very adept at using ball screens, getting to spots on the floor that he likes to get to. I think he's going to be a really solid spot scorer in the NBA. And for the Hawks just going forward, they need someone like this. I think especially in the postseason, we saw, hey, Dyson, despite all the great stuff he does, is a little limited on offense. And Nickeil, I love Nickeil Alexander-Walker, one of my favorite players in the NBA to watch. He struggles against ball pressure. That's just the reality for him. And I think, CJ bailed them out a couple of the games against the Knicks. The Knicks were a really great team, ended up hoisting the Larry O'Brien, so it's not to knock Atlanta as a whole, but you could tell where they were coming up a day late and a dollar short in terms of creation, and Kingston Flemings helps them in that regard long-term for sure. Pick number 9, the Dallas Mavericks. I did not have them trade down in this mock draft. There's been a lot of speculation about Dallas possibly looking to move down. Masai Ujiri and Mike Schmidt's first draft as a GM at the time I'm recording this. They don't have a head coach. And I think that's interesting. It's not the end-all be-all, and I think whoever Dallas does hire as a head coach will, of course, have to be all right with whoever they take. But I would feel way more confident if the head coach was already selected. You knew what kind of system and style you were trying to play in, because the congruency between coaching decisions and front office decisions should be nearly 1-to-1. You want players who fit your coach's identity. Now, it's possible that after the draft and after Masai Ujiri gets his guy, that he goes out and hires a coach who fits the guy that he drafted, and that would be awesome, and maybe that's what happens here. But for Dallas, this is a super important pick. It's the first selection Masai Ujiri will make with the Mavs. It's the first selection Mike Schmitz will be a part of with the Mavericks. They, of course, both have very good scouting and evaluation background, so I trust that they'll do a good job on this selection, which is why 9th overall I have them selecting guard Brayden Burries from Arizona, and I think this is a really premium option for Dallas. I know a lot of people are going to point to creation. They're going to point to the high-volume lead point guards. There's not a lot of guards typically year over year that come in with the profile that Brayden Burries has as a unique combo guard who has legit on-ball creation talent, but super functionality off of the ball as a great spot-up catch-and-shoot player, someone with meaningful relocation tools, someone who's a very good driver, can catch and attack closeouts very well, and he's also an intuitive cutter, and all of those characteristics make him an interesting fit long-term for me around Cooper Flagg, who I think Dallas will continue to lean into being kind of that point-forward archetype long-term, and that's what they should do. You know, obviously want your best player to have the ball in his hands a good amount. Cooper Flagg's going to have that. So it's not just let's go out and draft a point guard who can handle it. You need players who can play off of each other, and I think Brayden Burries does that at a very high level. And then in future drafts or future decisions, if Dallas still feels, hey, we could go get a ball handler or we need a ball handler, those are typically readily available. Almost every single draft class produces 2 or 3 of them that are at least interesting upside bets. There's also guys around the league like Trae Young just got traded for 0 first-round picks. CJ McCollum signed a 1-year, $20 million contract. Like, those kinds of players are available to some extent throughout the league. And I think for Dallas, maybe they address that later. Maybe they find a way through trade to do that. They obviously have Kyrie Irving on the roster now, so if they don't trade Kyrie, they just already have that answer in the short term to begin with. So Brayden Burries is a guy that I think fits long-term around Flagg, could fit the short-term version of this team, and also I think matches the draft identity from Masai Ujiri very well historically, looking for players who have two-way impact, a lot of ball skills, but also feel for the game on both ends of the floor. And I think Burries checks a lot of those boxes for Dallas here as an interesting backcourt option for them at number 9. Pick 10, the Milwaukee Bucks here now. And for Milwaukee, there's been a lot of noise pretty much all draft cycle long about their possible interest in a certain long athlete in this draft class. And if you look at what John Horst has done in recent history with draft picks like A.J. Johnson and Tyler Smith, he tends to love to swing for potential. And I throw up the air quotes on purpose because, in my opinion, potential tends to lie in the actual combination of ball skills, young productivity, and all of the functional stuff you see on the court. And I think John Horst has a very different perspective than me. I think he looks at potential as length and athleticism and physical tools, and that's gotten him in trouble, drafting a guy like A.J. Johnson who had zero reason to go in the first round. He didn't even make my top 60 big board in his draft class. And, you know, he's done that with a number of picks. The last 4 or 5 years have not been pretty for Milwaukee's draft history. Go look at them. It's not been great. But 10th overall here, I have the Bucks selecting forward Nate Ament from Tennessee, and I have John Horst kind of continuing that trend of swinging for upside, even if I don't believe the upside's there. For Nate Ament, I did not have any all-star upside. I did not have all-NBA upside for him. Now, I would love to be wrong. It would be great for both Milwaukee and the NBA in general if Nate Ament ends up becoming a superstar. The issue is at Tennessee, he made 43% of his two-pointers only, made under 40% of his threes by quite a wide margin. He was one of the more inefficient high-volume players in the entire 2026 NBA draft. And I think not only is there a lot of functionality that is missing in his game with the actual ability to handle, get deep paint touches, play off of 2 feet adequately, his functional play strength, that's something that he needs to get in the gym and get a lot stronger. What I do like about his game, there was some meaningful defensive moments. He definitely competes. He rebounds the ball decently well for his length and size, and he does have an NBA frame. So again, I think the floor here is reasonable. I think there's going to be a very good chance that Ament just ends up being a solid NBA player in his career, someone who can produce toward winning, and that's a big step forward for Milwaukee. They had about 4 of those guys on their total roster this past year. That's part of why they weren't good. Even when Giannis was on the floor, this team still struggled to a certain extent, and then without him, they were, of course, awful. And I think Ament can definitely contribute for them. We'll see if a Giannis trade materializes. You'll see one in this mock video, so keep your eyes out for that. But let's jump into pick 11 here now with the Golden State Warriors. And for Golden State, I went back and forth a lot. Of course, Porzingis and his upcoming impending free agency is super important. How they feel internally about their center spot is going to maybe dictate their decision here with how the board has fallen to them. But 11th overall, I have Golden State selecting forward Yaxel Lendeborg from Michigan. And clearly here, for me, I have the kind of sense that Porzingis will likely be back with Golden State, that they're going to try and run this roster back for the most part, and then try and add to it. And Yaxel Lendeborg feels like a very good addition onto their roster as a do-it-all wing, a very well-rounded player and prospect profile in general, very productive on the glass. You go back to his time at UAB as a dominant play finisher, a dominant rebounder, a dominant shot blocker in the American Conference, and then this past year in the Big Ten for Michigan, scaled his game completely differently, altered who he was, shot way more threes. Almost half of his total shot attempts this past year were three-pointers, and he shot it very, very well, hit some huge ones down the stretch of games. Big Ten tourney you think back to, you think about early NCAA tournament. He made a lot of big shots for Michigan whenever they needed it, and his willingness to adapt and fit a variety of roles. I know when he visited the Golden State Warriors in his press conference, he talked about being someone who can add playmaking to this roster. And I think about the way Steve Kerr coaches this team and the value that is typically placed and emphasized on playmaking. I feel like Yaxel Lendeborg can be a very additive piece for them and a guy who fits very well into Steve Kerr's offensive system while also being additive to the defensive context, whether that's being thrown at the point of attack occasionally or being functional as a low-man helper, playing in the gaps, and then getting on the glass as well. So for Golden State, I walked away with Yaxel as the pick here. Hopefully he likes the blue and gold because he'll be staying in it for the next 4 years on that NBA rookie contract. Pick 12, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. And for OKC specifically, of course, they're trying to get back to the mountaintop, trying to reach an NBA Finals again. And they're going to have to go through Victor Wembanyama to do so. Now, the pick that I'm going to make here for OKC is not necessarily, in my opinion, the best way to actually get back to that mountaintop against Wemby, but I think a lot of people, and especially a lot of smart people around the NBA, are going to view this as the best option, just like how in the early 2000s we saw teams acquiring huge, big physical centers just to have enough bodies to throw at Shaquille O'Neal and try and foul him a bunch and deal with him in any way that they could. 12th overall, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder here selecting center Aday from Michigan, and I think part of the issue here with that logic and part of the issue that teams ran into when they tried to have bigs that could burrow and fight with Shaquille down in the post was you were just playing suboptimal versions of Shaquille O'Neal. You're playing lesser skilled, lesser talented, lesser strength, lesser physical gifts Shaquille O'Neal against Shaquille O'Neal. So, like, what do you think is going to happen if you play the JV version against the varsity version? It's not going to end very well. And not to discredit Aday, he's a very interesting prospect. I really love his playmaking skills. I love his size, his rim deterrence. That stuff is all going to play very, very well in the NBA, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a tremendous 82-game player. And for OKC in general, this is a pick that's going to help them. It gives them some flexibility on their decision around Isaiah Hartenstein and his future with the Thunder organization. There's a lot of really good stuff from this Aday pick. But I really think for OKC specifically, there's going to be a lot of focus on beating San Antonio, continually trying to beat San Antonio. And again, Aday is a significantly lesser Victor Wembanyama. He doesn't have nearly the offensive dynamism. He doesn't have the foot speed, the mobility skills. He doesn't have the actual sheer combination of length and size either. The 9'9" standing reach is great. The 7'4" height or so is awesome. He's still smaller than Wemby. He's less mobile than Wemby. And again, you're just playing a suboptimal version of Wemby against Wemby. And that doesn't, in my opinion, help you win at the highest level, especially when teams are going to hunt him come playoff time and you're going to get into high pick and roll game, and he's going to have to try and contest at the perimeter a little bit. He's going to have to deal with some of the best pull-up shooters. That's all going to be a big challenge for him. Plus, how does he deal with transition basketball? His endurance and stamina is a huge question mark right now. Again, I want to emphasize, if OKC picks Aday, I'm going to probably grade the selection well because I like him as an individual player. I think he's going to be very good. But in my analysis today, I really wanted to talk about how I did not think he's a Wemby answer really that well. I think it's just going to be a huge struggle for him to deal with the very best stretch bigs in the NBA and the best pull-up shot makers in the NBA, which is a challenge for most bigs to begin with. But for him, especially in deep drop, like his impact in that kind of element of the game is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But again, for OKC, he's going to be able to help them shut off the paint. And next to Chet Holmgren, it's at least an interesting 4-5 pairing moving forward, which maybe gives OKC a little bit more comfortability to just throw Chet at Wemby for longer stretches instead of having Chet just function as a roamer, which we'll see how that kind of all grows, develops, and blossoms if Mara ends up with the Thunder on draft night. Trade alert here before pick number 13, and it's a big one. The Detroit Pistons acquire Tyler Herro from the Miami Heat, which is, of course, part of a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. Giannis ends up in South Beach with the Miami Heat, and Milwaukee walks away with 5 players, 4 first-round picks, and 3 second-round picks in this trade. Obviously, you could maybe argue that some first-round swap options could be in this, although I don't think the Bucks have all of the saying power here. They're going into the final year of Giannis's contract. He's 12 months away from being a unrestricted free agent if he wants to be. So there's going to have to be a little give or take here between some of these sides. And the Bucks, in those 5 players, get Isaiah Stewart, really solid regular season big man. Karis LeVert, that's a mid-sized expiring contract, which maybe Milwaukee could reroute later and use to eat a different contract and then pick up an asset or two. They get Nikola Jovic here, a young, exciting wing who has some legit ball skills and talent, which we just haven't been able to really see him stay healthy. And I don't think he's achieved a lot yet on an NBA floor, but there's definitely a lot of tools to work with there. Khalil Ware is one of the more promising young offensive bigs in the NBA. He's been really successful early in his career when he shared the floor with Bam Adebayo. And then offensively, he's shown the ability to step out behind the three-point line. He's one of the more unique athletes with his ability to finish above the rim and rebound it. There's a lot of stuff there to work with for sure. He's kind of the prime young player to get in this deal. And then Kasper Siakachonis, the Heat's first-round pick from last year. I think another interesting proposition for them, a player that I liked in his draft class quite a bit. I think there's legit dribble, pass, shoot skills. He's a little ball screen reliant, which was a big focal point of mine during the 2025 NBA draft discussion. But I do think for Milwaukee, there would be a runway here for him to find success. You, of course, get 4 first-round picks, one of them being pick number 13 in this draft. The asset that Detroit gives up is a 2027 Pistons first, so it's not pick number 21. I think that's an important thing to distinguish. Milwaukee gets a bunch of assets. The Heat get a huge addition onto the roster with Giannis, and then Detroit walks away with Tyler Herro in a deal that gives them a legitimate scoring wing around Cade Cunningham that kind of fits the style and identity that they've been looking for, which now puts Milwaukee back on the clock after at number 10 picking Nate Ament. They come back now at number 13 and take a stab on upside and shot creation and just overall offensive advantage generation. 13th overall by selecting guard Labaron Philon from Alabama. And I really like this draft slot number in general for Philon. Whether it's Milwaukee actually making the pick on draft night or if it's Miami making the pick on draft night. I've really liked him from the Heat's offense. And I think with Taylor Jenkins coming to town for Milwaukee, I think this is a really sensible selection for them because he is one of the guards that I really don't think needs a ball screen in this draft class. He's someone who can really consistently, routinely win out of isolation, win off the perimeter consistently for himself off the bounce, and I really like his skill set a lot because of that in Taylor Jenkins' system, which is going to emphasize a little bit of pace, going to emphasize paint touches, drive and kick basketball, and Labaron Philon was very successful in that kind of system for Nate Oates, playing out of 5-out spacing, playing in pace, playing in space opportunities, and then getting downhill and getting wherever he wants routinely. And I think for Milwaukee, this pick makes a lot of sense given their new head coach. given the direction of their franchise. If they do trade Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Labaron Philon on the basketball. A backcourt of Ryan Rollins and Labaron Philon's very interesting to me long term. And I also think with Nate Ament, getting this kind of guard around him is probably going to really help him alter his shot diet, create easier looks for him, and massively change possibly his efficiency outcomes in the NBA compared to what he was doing in college this past year for Tennessee. So not only does Philon make a lot of sense for this Bucks roster in general, but he also, I think, helps raise the outcomes for the guy they just picked at number 10 in this mock draft in Nate Ament. Pick 14, the Charlotte Hornets on the clock now. Had them stay put at number 14. Did consider a possible trade. I think the Hornets could definitely be active with one of these two first. They have a lot of flexibility. They also have 3 first-round picks in 2027. So it's super easy to be stoked about Charlotte as a whole going forward. But 14th overall, I have them here selecting forward Morez Johnson Jr. from Michigan. I really like this pick for an organization that top to bottom has been very, I think, lockstep focused on getting stronger, getting more physical, finding ways to improve their 2-point scoring, finding ways to improve their inside the arc play finishing, finding ways to improve their team defense. Morez Johnson, I feel like, just checks every single box and pays the bill on all of these certain little things that they're trying to get better at around LaMelo Ball, around Con Knipple, around Brandon Miller, and in the Charles Lee system, where they're going to be a super high volume 3-point team. They're going to exercise switchability, and having a 4-5 man like Morez Johnson who can guard up, can guard down. There's going to be legitimate nights where he guards 2 through 4 super routinely. Maybe at times he even switches on to 5s for long stretches, and then even possession by possession might be liable to switch onto point guards even a bit. I hate saying he can guard 1 through 5. That's really just not a thing in the NBA. I think it really devalues or desensitizes how good these guys are and how hard it is to guard 1s in the NBA and how physically demanding it is to defend 5s. I think there's very few examples of it historically. Someone like Jonathan Isaacs may be one of the most recent examples of some real success there. But Morez Johnson Jr., I think on a possession-by-possession basis, has a chance to at least defend out in space and then physically match up with bigs a bit. And that alone makes him one of the more unique players in the entirety of the league. And that's why for Charlotte, this is an absolute home run outcome for them if they get him at 14, because they already have the offensive identity to fit him in super well, find value for him as a screen and roll player, find value for him as an offensive rebound crash kind of guy, but then just stick him at the point of attack and playing around him defensively with more size, more switchability. It allows you to probably play lineups with him and Dybantsa on the court. You can get into a lot of high slips, and I think Morez's growing playmaking skills are going to be important for them too. But this is a really fun pick for Charlotte. I absolutely love Morez for them at this spot. I think the outcome is going to be quite strong for them if he's their guy at number 14. Pick 15, the Chicago Bulls on the clock. Once again, remember they picked Caleb Wilson earlier at number 4, now at number 15. I have them once again selecting center Hannes Steinbach from Washington. And I think for this team, it's very clear, like coming into the draft, they have just such massive holes in their front court. And to walk away with 2 uber productive freshmen in the way that they did with Caleb Wilson and Hannes Steinbach is a really good, promising sign of things to come. Steinbach measured in very well at the combine, I think better than pretty much everyone was expecting, with legit, like basically 7-footer size. He obviously has a lot of the analytic backing that you can really buy into as an individual player. He rebounds the ball at a very high level. He was super efficient offensively, chose his spots very well, was productive in his own form of self-creation by getting on the offensive glass, very good volume as a screen and roll big man. All of that stuff, I think, paints to easy offense for him in the NBA. And then, of course, you have some of the upside long-term with the stretch skills, the ability to put the ball on the deck just a little bit, some of the passing feel. He comes from very good basketball pedigree. His dad played for the German national team alongside Dirk Nowitzki there in Germany. So I always look at players who have kind of that high-level basketball pedigree and background pretty favorably. And I think Hannes Steinbach, not only did he find his own levels of success, his own channels of high-quality play in Big Ten basketball this past year, but he also, again, comes from that line of pedigree a bit. And I think for Chicago, if you told Bulls fans, 12 months ago that in the 2026 draft, you'd be walking out with a guy who was a consistent double-double machine for Washington at pick 15 from that Blazers pick, and then you also told them that you're getting Caleb Wilson, who would be the 4th pick in the draft after a really great freshman season, I think all Bulls fans would be pretty ecstatic about their future, and I think there's a lot to be optimistic about if you're a Bulls fan after this mock draft here so far in the first round, and they have another pick coming up in round 2 as well. Pick 16, the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, they are kind of in a similar boat, right? They're walking out with Cam Boozer in this draft so far, and they have another near lottery pick here at 16. And with this selection, I have them taking forward Karim Lopez from the New Zealand Breakers. Now, admittedly, Karim Lopez was a little bit lower on my board. I do have questions about his overall ability to make shots and beat teams who gap off of him a little bit from the perimeter. That's going to always be one of the bigger questions for me for players like this. I think there's some kind of similarities to Hugo Gonzalez, who, listen, had a really fun rookie season for Boston, but come playoff time, some of those questions became very prevalent and very limiting for him for the Celtics. It also reminds me back of Josh Green coming out of Arizona, where all the playmaking stuff's super interesting. The athletic traits are there. The point of attack defensive tools are unique and there for sure, but also just kind of ran into issues where against Utah early in his career, the Jazz stuck Rudy Gobert on him. And all of a sudden, all that stuff isn't as functional anymore when the help defense starts coming or stops coming over and teams just say, yeah, try and score on our 5 at the rim. We dare ya. Like that stuff, there's limits there for that. And for me with Karim Lopez, I do fear some of that, but I love his herky-jerky style on the basketball. I think his ability to attack closeouts is quite good. If you can routinely get smalls to guard him, there's some advantage here. And that's why Memphis, I think, makes a lot of sense, because not only did you get Cam Boozer already in this draft, so there's a big, strong physical forward. You have Zach Edey already. You can tell how much I value having that huge size and how that forces certain matchups. Like if you're defending Memphis, you can't put a small guy on Zach Edey. That's just not going to work. So that alone is going to dictate matchups, and that's where Karim Lopez maybe has a little bit of viability for Memphis that he wouldn't have for other organizations a bit. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to see play out. I can see the Grizzlies falling in love with him as a prospect, though, because there's a lot of unique dribble pass skills for a player with legit forward size, really unique physical measurements, and a high compete level defensively in the pro game over there in New Zealand for the Breakers. So a lot of interesting stuff. I do think his NBL tape is quite good. Took a big step forward this past year from the year prior as well. So pretty good year-over-year progression. I think that's going to be something that Memphis could value as well on draft night. Pick 17, Oklahoma City back on the clock after drafting Aday at number 12. I have the Thunder here at 17 selecting forward Dalen Swain from Texas. And this just feels like an Oklahoma City Thunder pick, a player who is underrated athletically, a player who is extremely productive in multiple facets of basketball, both being the dribble, pass, shoot components of the game, especially emphasis on the dribble component, where he was a very good self-creator, one of the best self-creating wings in the entire 2026 draft class. You really look at AJ Dybantsa being one of the few that was more productive than Swain off the dribble himself as a creator of offense. And I think for the Thunder in general, it's just more players who are viable off of the catch, off of a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because SGA is going to draw so many bodies. You saw the way that teams defend him in the playoffs, either throwing just flat-out double teams at him early or trying to show bodies at him inside the arc. The moment he tries to get anywhere to any of his spots, he's going to get met with an extra guy. And having someone like Swain, who not only showed some improvement and development as a shooter this past year, but is really hell-bent on getting to the rim. And somebody who, the moment he catches it, he's going to try and .5 that thing. He's going to try and get into the paint. He's got the playmaking tools to kick it out from there, but also the functionality as a scorer at the rim, where he was very efficient this past year to finish some of those plays off while defenses are in rotation. That's why he's such an interesting prospect for me. I think his defense is legitimately solid, and something that OKC would also value just in how much they really care about two-way play. Dalen Swain, to me, checks a lot of the boxes of what Sam Presti might look to get. And I really think on draft night here, pick 17 or pick 18 is probably my perceived floor for Dalen Swain in the draft, whether it be Oklahoma City at 17 or Charlotte at 18, being really both great landing spots for him regardless. Talking about pick 18, here we are now with Charlotte. They took Morez Johnson Jr. at number 14 just a few picks ago. And now with number 18, I absolutely love this overall mock draft for Charlotte at 14 and 18. I have them here now selecting wing Cameron Carr from Baylor. And I think his catch readiness, his transition play finishing, this is all a super functional fit into what Charlotte already does, and this is them doubling down on their identity. I feel like the Morez Johnson Jr. pick was them adding to their identity, adding a wrinkle to who they can be, adding some necessity to raising the floor of their roster and addressing some of their needs. And Cameron Carr is like, hey, by the way, this was one of the best seasons we've had in the last 10, 15 years in Charlotte, and we need more of that. We want more of what makes us special. We want more of what makes us us. And Cameron Carr does that. He shoots the ball very, very well from three. He's got really deep range, and he's a tremendous athlete too. So I think he also adds in some of that functionality as a two-point finisher. He's not going to come with more creation. I still think that's something Charlotte is missing a little bit from this draft, and that's where maybe Dalen Swain, if he was available, would be very sensible for them because he's another guy who can handle and create a little bit more. Cameron Carr is more of a traditional play finisher, whether that's in transition or playing off the catch on rip-throughs and goes, and then just cutting. But very functional in a lot of those play styles. And again, the movement shooting, the three-point volume, the rim success, all of that stuff's going to be super additive for the Hornets. If they walk out with Morez Johnson Jr. and Cam Carr, it's like a very, 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 very great draft for the Hornets. And they walk away very happy again after killing it in the 2025 draft with Knipple and Sion James and Ryan Kalkbrenner. They walk out with now Cameron Carr and Morez Johnson, and it's just an absolute home run for them. Once again, would be back-to-back drafts where they absolutely nailed it there in Charlotte. Pick 19, the Toronto Raptors here. Some Raptors fans probably with a sigh of relief seeing that I did not trade their selection this time around in my final mock draft. I know a lot of Raptors fans have concerns about that. They don't want to see this pick get burnt in a salary dump. So 19th overall, I have the Raptors now selecting guard Christian Anderson from Texas Tech. And I absolutely love what Toronto's building, especially now that I've been able to see them all on the floor together. They were healthy this past year. And I really liked the selection of Colin Murray-Boyles. That was really the biggest step for this team in terms of making me like the identity of their roster going forward. Because with Scotty Barnes and CMB, you have two really unique, rangy, high intelligence, high effort defenders that can anchor your team and provide value all over the court in a variety of ways. And it showed for Toronto. They had the fifth best defense in the NBA this past year on a per 100 possession basis. Now what they need to do is find more offense. And I think specifically in the playoffs with Emmanuel quickly out, you saw how kind of dry their offense can be for stretches, and kind of the absence of pull-up shot-making talent without IQ on the floor was very difficult to watch at times. And even though they won 7 games against Cleveland, they came up short, and I think their offense was a big culprit or big reason why. And I think Christian Anderson would help address that. He's an awesome pull-up shooter. He's got one of the best pull-up three-point shots in the entire draft class this year. And he's got a very, very good track record of really high volume and very high three-point success in terms of his actual three-point raw percentage. So for Toronto here, this is a very offensively slanted pick. Of course, he's a little bit smaller. He's going to be a little bit turnover prone. He's going to get hunted because of that. But I think the Raptors have the team defense kind of infrastructure in place behind him to protect him and insulate him, bring help to him early and often and active. They can always do what New York does and what Golden State has done with Curry too, where you try and hedge ball screens, you don't concede switches, you don't let teams just pick on your guys super readily, and you try and control your matchups in the way that you want to control them. I think more teams in the NBA need to do that in general. I think Darko Rajakovic is one of the coaches smart enough to not only do that, but also make it work at a high level too defensively in the league. Pick 20, San Antonio on the clock here now. I know a lot of Spurs fans would really love to see a few of the guys right in front of them on their roster, whether that be a Morez Johnson Jr. or a Dalen Swain or a Cameron Carr. A lot of these guys would be tremendous for San Antonio, but I really do like this pick for them at number 20. With this selection, I have the Spurs taking center Jaden Quaintance from Kentucky. Did not receive a green room invite, which I think was one of the most interesting situations pre-draft here. The fact that teams did not basically tell the NBA, yeah, he's like a lock to go top 18, top 20-ish, was very interesting. That's why he falls to 20 here in this mock draft. For the most part, he has been kind of locked into the top 19, top 18 picks for me since the lottery took place in Chicago. But with Quaintance here at 20, well, listen, I don't think there's a lot of likelihood that we would see Quaintance and Wemby on the floor together very often. I think this is a significant floor raiser for the Spurs defense when Wemby goes to the bench. And we saw Luke Cornett, who I really like as a player. He's a great teammate, does a lot of nice stuff on the floor for sure. He's selfless. We saw some of the physical limitations for him in the playoffs and just throughout the regular season in general. Like, he's not the best mover. He's not super mobile. He doesn't close out very well. And that's just not the same with Jaden Quaintance. You can comfortably play him at the level. You can have him fly around the floor. He wants to be active on defense. That's really going to be his calling card in the NBA, is activity, his length and shot blocking timing and mobility skills, assuming he's healthy, that's really the biggest question mark for him, and I don't have access to his medicals. But assuming that the medicals came back clear enough, this is like a dream come true pick for San Antonio, because 12 months ago in my way too early mock, I was talking about Quaintance as a surefire top 10 pick, assuming he would have came back healthy this year for Kentucky. We just didn't see that. He only played 4 games for the Wildcats this year. But with him on the court, like, there's a real chance that the Spurs, who have one of the best defenses in the NBA, they can maybe maintain that a little bit more when Wemby goes to the bench. Wemby's the biggest cheat code in NBA history on that end of the floor, but Jaden Quaintance might be one of the biggest cheat codes in this entire 2026 draft because of his ability to impact the ball from behind. He's one of the best chase down shot blockers in recent draft history. And if he's actually healthy and available, this is a high impact defensive minded player who, with the Spurs guards and the creation talent that they already have, can probably elevate his offensive impact to a pretty good amount too as a screen and roll big. So I think for San Antonio, I really like this pick for them. I think it's worth taking kind of that gamble on his defensive upside, because if it hits, it's an absolute home run for them at number 20. Pick 21, the Detroit Pistons, who have already added Tyler Herro in this mock draft with their 2027 first round pick. They kept this pick here at 21 as a gamble on trying to go all in on winning now. And I think for the Pistons, it's a very good gamble to take, because this draft class is quite strong. You really don't risk a lot of long-term flexibility by only trading your 2027 first, because in a year that'll convey, and then you have all of your own flexibility back anyway. So you basically are renting out that flexibility for just a little bit here to get Tyler Herro, improve your roster, but you still have 21 to come back and take another step forward on your team. And after getting Tyler Herro, you obviously added a little bit more creation. You added, of course, the volume three-point shooting and the movement shooting that you want on this roster. But I still think you want to get into the backcourt a little bit more and just add more creation talent. It's been my favorite mock selection pretty much the entirety of the year. 21st overall, I have the Pistons selecting guard Bennett Sturtz from Iowa. And if he's available for them, if he makes it to this pick, he should be the guy that Detroit walks away with on draft night. He's a terrific talent. His shot chart's green from everywhere. He is unbelievably efficient. You can't rush this guy. He's comfortable in traffic. He's comfortable in space. He's comfortable with pace. He's comfortable playing slow. And for the Pistons, when the game gets tough, they need more guys who are comfortable in that kind of environment and can get Cade Cunningham the ball in the spots that he wants it, can set up certain actions, can run your offense. I think that's all going to be huge for JB Bickerstaff and the Pistons, is having a guy like Bennett Sturtz when the game gets tough, Cade Cunningham's getting denied, who can go get a bucket for you a bit. Sturtz did that all of the time for Iowa, and I think there's kind of this real aesthetic bias against Bennett Sturtz because he doesn't have the quick, extremely fast blow-bys like Ibuka, Corey, and Labaron Philon, but what he has is a much better track record of success actually scoring the ball. He's more efficient than all of those guys on pretty much every level of the court. Besides Labaron from 3 this past year, Labaron had a really great shooting season. Sturtz was a good shooting season, very, very effective still, especially given the kind of shot quality and difficulty of his looks. But I think for Detroit here in general, this is a no-brainer selection and one where they walk out with just a really darn good player. And all of a sudden, a team that kind of was a little shy on shot creation this next season goes into the postseason with 3 guys who I think can really create looks, whether it's Cade, Herro, or Bennett Sturtz, and that's really been kind of the calling card of the best teams in the NBA lately. They have a multitude of players who can create offense. You look at New York, they had Brunson and Cat obviously doing a lot of that heavy lifting. You look at the Spurs on the western side with Harper, Castle, and Fox, and then obviously Wemby. You look at the Pacers from a year ago with the kind of combination of McConnell and Nembhard and Halliburton, and then you look at even OKC with AJ Mitchell, SGA, and J-Dub. Like, all of the best teams have 2, 3, 4 guys who can create offense for you. Detroit went from really having one of those guys consistently with Cade to having 3 of them in just one mock draft by picking up Herro and Sturtz in the fashion that they did, which I absolutely love for them. Pick 22, the Philadelphia 76ers. here now, and I think one of the big emphases for the Sixers this offseason is going to be getting a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, finding more physicality, more rebounding, and still looking at some long-term upside to continue building around the Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe timeline moving forward. And the Sixers at 22 select center Chris Sacramento Jr. from Houston. Of course, if you go back to all the high school tape, this is a player with very exciting possible high-end outcomes that I think a lot of people could easily talk themselves into. He's got some unique on-ball skills, a pretty smooth-looking jumper where predominantly a lot of his shot die this past year for Houston came in that mid-range area. You think about the way that Joel Embiid plays, the areas of the floor that he occupies. Actually very similar to Chris Sacramento. Now, Sacramento's not nearly the actual play finisher and talent that Joel Embiid is offensively, which is why I think a shot diet renovation will be important for Sacramento early in his career. But the kind of baseline functionality of Edgecombe and Maxey and their downhill prowess, I think, opens up the value of the stretch big play from a guy like Chris Sacramento, who is also, again, just unbelievably productive on the defensive glass. He's got really long arms, 7'5" wingspan. He's a good athlete. I think this just foots the bill pretty well for Philadelphia here at number 22. 23, the Atlanta Hawks on the clock now. They went with Kingston Flemings earlier at pick number 8, and now at number 23, I have them selecting forward Allen Graves from Santa Clara. And I think for Quinn Snyder, after getting Kingston Flemings, there's your on-ball creator. There's a guy who's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on off-the-dribble scoring for your team moving forward. But getting a connector like Allen Graves would be super valuable for them too, a player who is very functional, flowing off of dribble handoffs, playing off the top of the key and big above offense, which is very, very useful for Quinn Snyder in the way that they want to play. And I think just in general, giving you another guy who can step out, shoot threes, find value on defense as an active roamer. He's got very good lateral mobility skills for a player of his length and size. There's a lot of hope that he can become a unique tweener big where at times you can play him as a small ball 5 and really space teams out. That's something they already like to do with Onyeka Okongwu, but he could probably coexist pretty well with Onyeka. And then you have more size. You're a little bit more switchy. You can be a little bit more daring at the point of attack and ball screens because you have another kind of quote-unquote big behind you. That's kind of the interesting thing about Okongwu and Graves in general is neither of them are legit bigs, but they have plus forward size. So that's where you can lean on them helping each other out. And obviously with Graves' activity level defensively, that's where you can find some real optimism about his impact. Now, some of the question marks are very legit. He's doing this in the West Coast Conference. It's a lesser conference against a little bit lesser competition. He came off the bench, was only playing about 23 minutes a game, only started 4 games this past year. So the question marks are definitely valid and real, but the tape is too, and the tape was quite good. And even when he had a chance against a high major, he looked really darn good against Kentucky in their NCAA tournament game that they came up just short after Otega Oweh drilled an unbelievable half quarter to even send the game to overtime. Pick 24, the champion New York Knicks. Awesome to say that. Here at number 24, I have them selecting forward Koa Pete from Arizona. And I was diving back through some more New York Knicks film today, actually, before recording this video. And for me, I just absolutely love what Mike Brown does with his offense. Of course, brought over a lot of the remnants of what he was doing with Sacramento around Domantas Sabonis there. And then with Karl Anthony Towns, like really, I think maximized a lot of their away splits and wide splits. High split action, the value of cutting is just so unbelievably important for them. And Koa Pete becomes such an interesting addition because he's got the big, physical, strong body. He's a guy that you're going to be able to throw across multiple positions defensively, assuming all goes well in his NBA career. And if the jump shot wasn't a question mark, this would be a top 10, top 12 pick in the draft. Very productive, great on the boards, very valuable defensively, a very good play finisher in the painted area and around the rim. Everything outside of the paint, though, is all of a sudden a huge question mark because he shot 28% on middies. He shot 35% on threes, which doesn't sound so bad, but when you realize the sample size is 7 of 20, it doesn't sound so sexy anymore. So, I think for the Knicks, this is one of those opportunities for them to draft and develop. Obviously, they should be looking for guys who can compete and contribute now. If they wanted to go a little bit more aggressive in that win-now department and take someone like Isaiah Evans, I wouldn't blame them at all. But Koa Pete's a guy that I think would be really fascinating for their offensive system around Karl Anthony Towns, especially if they internally feel confident that they can help develop his shot. And I'm going to be very transparent with you guys. Knowing NBA executives, knowing people around the NBA in the way that I do, I've met a good number of people in the NBA. There's a lot of people that believe that shooting is the most developable skill. I don't necessarily agree, but a lot of people feel that way. And there's going to be teams and front offices that tell themselves that and sell themselves on co-compete as a result because of that exact philosophy. Pick 25, the Lakers here now. Been very focused on a big man. Now, I want to say that I don't think that's necessarily the only possibility here for the Lakers, but I do like this pick for them quite a bit. So 25th overall, I have them selecting center Henry Vassar from UNC. And as I was going back through a lot of the data from this past season, looking at where everyone ranked in the league and certain kind of characteristics and traits, it's still surprising to me that the Lakers, with JJ Redick as their head coach, who was such an awesome three-point volume shooter for his career, and with Luka Doncic at the helm, that this Lakers team is actually one of the lower three-point volume teams in the NBA. Now, it does make sense when you consider their personnel with LeBron and Reeves off of Luka. You think about Rui Hachimura, and then obviously DeAndre Ayton kind of in that starting lineup. There's not a lot of three-point volume there, and that's where Henry Vassar could maybe help them because he was quite a good three-point shooter this past year at UNC. Now, do I think he's going to be like the 70% three-point attempt rate big man? No, I don't. So it's not like all of a sudden the volume just escalates and you're one of the highest volume three-point shooting teams. But I do think he'll help them in terms of efficiency and just having a slight uptick in three-point volume. DeAndre Ayton legitimately did not shoot a single three this past year for the Lakers. And I think Vassar, a big kind of attraction point of his game is playing off the top of the key, being functional as a stretch big man, whether it is as a passer or a shooter from beyond the arc. So for the Lakers here, you, I think, add a little bit of three-point volume. You add some legit functionality out of your chin action looks that they really like to run, with Vassar being a possible table setter out of those looks. You could always run some inverted pick and roll, which I think this team needs to do a lot more of. Something that they really just don't do a ton of for the most part, unless it's LeBron on the basketball. So with Vassar, it gives them a different kind of approach that they could play with a little bit. And again, it's just all about size and added value and drop coverage too. And right now there's a narrative going around about Henry Vassar that he's an absolute cone on defense. I don't agree with that at all. This guy has, I think, very good intuition and intelligence defensively, and he knows how to compete at a high level on that end of the floor with his actual early positioning and body positioning on the defensive end of the court. At pick number 26, the Denver Nuggets are going to stay focused on something very similar to what we just talked about with the Lakers, and that is three-point volume. In David Adelman's offense, they do a very good job of finding cuts and opportunities to get to the rim off of Nikola Jokic, a very good number of rim assists per game for him, and that's obviously all very great, but you have legitimately the best passing big man of all time. You would think that you'd be a higher volume three-point shooting team than they are. They ranked 20th in the NBA this past year in total three-point attempts per game, which is an uptick from where they were previously, and they actually shot it very, very well from three this past year, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the league, but they just need more volume, and I think that's really undeniable when you look at this roster. And I think for the way that they play, if you want to open up more of that rim opportunity in general, having a little bit more three-point gravity would be great. But then also improving that three-point volume means you need guys who are flamethrowers, guys who are quick trigger three-point shooters who they step on the court, they know what they want to do, and that's shoot threes. So 26th overall, I have the Denver Nuggets selecting guard Isaiah Evans out of Duke for that very reason. The moment he gets on the court, he knows who he is, he knows what he provides to the table. He is one of the best role player-oriented shot diet prospects in the entire draft. A vast majority of three-point attempts and rim attempts per 40 minutes. In fact, he ranked in the 98th percentile of all Division I college basketball players in rim and three-point attempts per 40 minutes this past year. So you're looking at a player that understands who he should be on the court, and around Jamal Murray and around Nikola Jokic is going to provide exactly what you're expecting him to provide when you draft him here 26th overall. In my opinion, this should be the floor in the draft for Isaiah Evans. I would be shocked if he makes it past the Denver Nuggets on draft night. If so, he's not going to last much longer. I can guarantee you that. But the Nuggets at 26 would do very well drafting him, getting a shooter of this magnitude on a rookie scale contract, I think is quite good. And then also from like an actual long-term developmental standpoint, I think the meaningful growth we saw from his freshman to sophomore campaign is a real promising sign of him continuing to grow, continuing to elevate his play a little bit as a play finisher, as a shot maker, as a driver of the basketball, and then defensively just took a lot more ownership and put more emphasis on that end of the floor for him being an actual playable college defender. And he was not only playable, but he was actually pretty good at it this past year for Duke. Not saying he's going to be a great defender in the NBA. I don't believe that. But this is a player that I think is going to be additive toward winning for sure. And I think for the Denver Nuggets, it's a very, very nice option for them at number 26. Pick 27, the Boston Celtics here now. And I think for Boston, obviously, you're going to have questions about their scheme, their identity, and everything in between. But 27th overall, I have them selecting guard Ibuka Okori from Stanford. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me about Brad Stevens' end-of-season press conferences, which I've not been able to really shake from my mind from a couple of months ago now, was his emphasis and his point of detail on needing a little bit more creation. And of course, he said that after a season where Jason Tatum missed most of the year and ended up missing Game 7 against Philly when they lost. But I really just think like this is the team that could be a dark horse team to draft for some potential upside on the ball. And I have them taking Ibuka Okori here as kind of an indicator of that. Now, again, they could go a number of different ways. I feel like Boston every single year casts a very wide net on who they could possibly look to draft. They bring in a lot of different pre-draft workout guys. They do a lot of different stuff in terms of who they look at, how they evaluate, how active they are in their gym in the summer. And that's a lot of stuff I really value about that organization, too. I feel like they're a whole bunch of hard workers. I feel like it starts at the very top with Brad Stevens and trickles all the way down throughout their whole organization. I really admire the way that Boston goes about their effort and their work and their intentionality. And I feel like they could be kind of that fun team that all of a sudden looks at a player who was one of the highest self-creating rim volume players in the entire draft and says, that would be pretty good in Joe Mazzulla ball. A guy who can get paint touches off the bounce, doesn't need a ball screen to do so, and that opens up a lot of drive and kick opportunity for us. And for the Celtics, there's question marks about the guard play long term. There's been some speculation about Derek White, possible trade rumors. Obviously, the Celtics, I think, internally really value Derek White. They're not just going to trade him to trade him. But long term, like you have to start thinking about your future a little bit too. Derek White's into his early 30s. And, you know, obviously NBA players are aging better than ever right now, too. But I think Ibuka Okori would be definitely an interesting pickup for Boston on one where they could maybe look at themselves and say, even if it's not right away, we could value the long-term development here and be patient with him because we think a roster with Tatum back healthy next year is probably still kind of in that ballpark or stratosphere of competing for an NBA championship anyway. So really interesting selection here for Boston at 27. Pick 28, the Minnesota Timberwolves here now. Would have definitely been a possible Ibuka Okori team. Interestingly enough, they worked out Labaron Philon, and I didn't have them move up in my mock draft here, but I think that's really interesting that owning pick 28 in this draft, they were working out Labaron Philon just a few days before the NBA draft. There's something worth monitoring there. Do I know what that move's going to look like? If that move even happens, could it be something between Miami and Milwaukee with Minnesota involved? Maybe. I don't know. But it's worth monitoring, in my opinion, for sure. 28th overall here, I have the Timberwolves selecting guard Malik Thomas from Arkansas. And I think for Minnesota specifically, they're going to really miss Dante DiVincenzo with his torn Achilles. The moment he went down in the postseason, they completely fell flat on their face a little bit in terms of their ability to play out of advantage and maximize advantage opportunities. And that's something Malik Thomas did very well at Arkansas off of Darius Acuff Jr. His catch readiness, his willingness to sprint ahead in transition, I think that would be very additive around Ayo Dosunmu there in Minnesota, who I think the Wolves will heavily try and prioritize in keeping going forward. So Malik Thomas at 28, I think is a really nice option for the Wolves as kind of this idealized off-the-ball play finisher, catch-and-shoot oriented guy off of Anthony Edwards' gravity, which is something that is very good. Nickeil Alexander-Walker used to be great in that role for Minnesota, especially as a corner three-point shooter. But I think Malik Thomas a little bit more like Dante DiVincenzo offensively, where he's a little bit more comfortable above the break, shooting from the wing more frequently, and then, again, just shooting it with range, shooting it with confidence super quickly, something that I know infuriates Wolves fans at times, but can also be just viewed as very beneficial for their offense around Anthony Edwards when he gets blitzed and forced off the basketball. Pick 29, the Cavaliers now at this spot of the draft. I think for Cleveland in general here, I've been very focused on guards and adding players who are shot ready or creation oriented. But with the board kind of falling the way it has, with Malik Thomas off the board now, with Abuka Corey off the board, we're going to kind of shift gears. And 29th overall, I have the Cavs selecting Darius Reed Jr. in my final mock draft. So instead looking at a little bit more size for them, and they get a big man who was super productive for UConn, not only throughout the course of the season, but also especially in the NCAA tournament. He was a dominant rebounder, dominant creator, dominant play finisher, unbelievable in the post. Now, I don't think a lot of that game is going to translate the exact same in the NBA. They're not going to feed him a whole bunch of post touches, possession after possession, like the Huskies did. But I think for Cleveland, it's about the screen and roll game. It's about the DHOs off the top of the key, getting Donovan Mitchell and James Harden into easier actions a little bit more routinely, and allowing those guys to play a little bit more freely without team defenses completely just set up waiting for them all of the time. And I think Darius Reed can be additive and valuable for them in that, with some of his playmaking feel off the top of the key. But primarily it's just a real emphasis on getting a little bit more skilled size and just another big man into the room for a long 82-game season, and a valuable big off the bench if they want to stay big when one of their two bigs between Mobley and Allen check off. Primarily Allen, because I don't think Darius Reed and Allen would probably coexist on the floor too often together, if we're being honest. Pick number 30, the final pick of the first round, in the Dallas Mavericks on the clock. Once again, remember they went with Brayden Burries earlier at pick number 9. And now at number 30, I have them selecting forward/center Zuby Ejiofor from St. John's. And another pick that just really feels Masai Ujiri coded to me. Super high field defensive prospect. We saw last year Masai Ujiri in the last draft he was running for the Raptors take Colin Murray Boyles. And I don't want to compare Zuby to CMB, but I think there is some overlap there. Obviously did a lot of heavy lifting for St. John's offense, very rim-oriented in his offensive attack. But the combination of defensive feel and athleticism and intelligence and activity and effort, to me, feels very Masai Ujiri-esque. And I think if Ejiofor were to slip into the first round, it would not be super surprising to me. Now, for the most part, he has not been featured in a majority of my first-round mock drafts throughout the year, especially as of late. But he does slip into the final first-round mock draft on the channel here, and I feel like it's well-deserved. He had a really great career, especially the last couple of seasons at St. John's. Super productive player, had a tremendous end of his college career in general in the Big East there for St. John's, and did a lot of really great stuff for Coach Pitino. Again, I think like a competitor, and the high intelligence point that he has here is all of the stuff that would draw Dallas toward him. And I think one thing, too, I know some Mavs fans are going to say our front court's already overloaded with P.J. Washington and Gafford and Lively. You have to remember it's a new front office. Like, just because some of these young players are good, and I really like Gafford, I really like Derek Lively, I don't think they should be moving off of either of those guys. I'm cool if a P.J. Washington trade happens. Like, just because we like those players and we know that they can provide value doesn't mean that the front office feels the exact same way that the previous regime did. And those players might be available. Daniel Gafford could possibly be traded. Who knows what happens with Derek Lively? He's been injured so often that, maybe the league's just a little bit lower on him than they should be. Like, that kind of stuff happens. And I could definitely see the Mavs walking away with a big man like Zuby here at number 30, and he makes a lot of sense for what Masai Ujiri has historically valued. My prize picks lineup centers around a couple of WNBA games here. Angel Reese I have at more than 15.5 points. She's been off to such a great start to her season for Atlanta after being traded this past offseason. She has been thriving in her new environment. Sophie Cunningham at more than 9.5 points I thought was definitely a solid number for her in kind of a revenge possible game here against Phoenix. And then in that Dallas versus Seattle game, Natasha Heidemann at 13.5 points, more than that number, I thought was definitely doable for her. Reminder, if you use code HMA over at Prize Picks and play $5, you can get $50 in lineups. Prize Picks is now available in more than 40 states, so make sure to play, and please play responsibly. Team picks are now available. You can also follow me over there on Prize Picks. And then just once again, don't forget to use code HMA over at Prize Picks. Play $5, get $50 instantly in lineups. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. And let's jump back into round 2 of the mock draft here now. Trade alert going into round 2. and it's a fun one. The Spurs jump up to the very first pick of round 2. Remember, there will be a night in between round 1 and round 2. The round 2 will pick back up on Wednesday after round 1 finishes up on Tuesday night. So the Spurs and Knicks, the two teams just facing each other in the NBA Finals, actually work out a trade together. Funny to see that. But the Spurs move up from 35 and 42 all the way up to number 31, clearly circling a guy that they think would be a real nice fit onto their roster as an addition. After drafting Jaden Quaintance at number 20, they now have pick 31 to work with. The Knicks get a couple of second-round picks in return to maybe fill out their depth a little bit and get a couple more young pieces on cheap, standard second-round exception contracts or just two-way contracts in general. But 31st overall now, the Spurs select forward Alex Karaban from UConn. I think very simple. We're going to try and keep these second-round picks a little bit more quick and a little bit more pacey, but for Alex Karaban, very simple here. Not only did the Spurs find a lot of success drafting his former UConn teammate, Stephon Castle, but the Spurs are looking for smart, high intelligence, winning players who can address positional needs. And Alex Karaban is all of that for them. He's a very good four who can shoot the ball. He's a tremendous passer, very connective in his overall play style and DNA. There's a reason Coach Dan Hurley loves him, and I think he would catch on very, very well with the Spurs on the exact same timeline as a lot of their young guys with Castle and Wemby and Harper going forward. I think Karaban would just be a super easy, fit like a glove kind of player into their roster and their style of play from all of the other advantage creators they already have on the team. Pick 32, Memphis, back on the clock. And one thing that I run into issues with a little bit with the Grizzlies is how full their roster is. Now, it's very possible we could see them salary dump a guy, but I wanted to keep that in mind here, 32nd overall. So I have the Grizzlies selecting guard Sergio De La Rea from Valencia. And I like his game a lot. He's a very crafty pick and roll operator. You typically think about these European prospects, their ability to come over and they play with high feel, high intelligence because they're trained in a way that the U.S. just simply doesn't train their players. They are more passing oriented. They understand how to win as a team, not just as an individual out of isolation. And I think a lot of that's true here for De La Rey to a high degree. But there's also a lot of speculation right now that he would be open to being a draft and stash player for a year or two. And I think for Memphis, who already has so much young talent on their roster, you want to use this pick and draft someone young with upside and value. Obviously, De La Rey can be that for them. But right now, they also have kind of a plethora of guards already on their roster. You think about Ty Jerome, you think about John Morant. If no trade really materializes for any of those guys, instead of trying to kind of spearhead and force open minutes by making a bad trade, maybe this just buys them a little bit of time. Now maybe you can go into the offseason. If a Ty Jerome trade materializes between now and the trade deadline, great. If a John Morant trade materializes between now and the trade deadline, great. Go execute that. Go make that move. And then a year from now, you can bring De La Rey over, and he's probably taken some meaningful steps forward, more on-ball time overseas, a little bit more growth from him, and all of a sudden for Memphis, he ends up being a really nice pickup for them in an offense that's going to be more pick-and-roll oriented moving forward with Zach Edey, which is something we talked about here toward the end of the season anyway. De La Rey could be a really nice addition for them around Cedric Coward, around Cam Boozer, around Karim Lopez, and around, of course, Zach Edey there in Memphis. Pick 33, the Brooklyn Nets. Now at this spot, remember earlier on we went with Keaton Wagler for them 6th overall, and at 33, kind of building off of the draft philosophy we saw this front office and organization work with last year, I have them selecting forward Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State. A super high field forward with really great connectivity and playmaking skills. Solid enough athlete to compete at the NBA level for sure. And I think the shot's going to be the question mark for him long term is how reliable and viable is he as a scorer. But Brooklyn last year very clearly overlooked some of that anyway with Saraf and Traore, with Danny Wolf and Yegor Dioman even. They overlooked a lot of scoring lapses and scoring insignificances and valued the playmaking component and dribble pass shoot skills. And Joshua Jefferson, obviously a super high leverage passer, very good at making a variety of different reads, and I think would be a really interesting kind of fit into the team that the Nets are looking to build there in Brooklyn. The Clippers at number 34. Reminder, this pick came over from the earlier trade when they moved down from number 5 to number 7. They have this pick now at their disposal. As a result, now I have the Clippers taking forward Baba Miller from Cincinnati. And I think about The Clippers in their front court a little bit, especially after trading Ivica Zubac, there's going to be a lot of pressure, in my opinion, on Yannick Niederhauser to take a huge step forward over the offseason and provide legit anchor type of center play for them. He was an interesting pick for them at 30 last year, one that I was not expecting. Now if you can get Baba Miller, another long, rangy, roamy forward who can really rebound it at a high level. He's a great athlete, very functional, and going back to his time at FSU, and then as he kind of developed and grown over his career, he's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger, he's gotten a little bit faster. The jump shot's really never developed, but for, I think, especially Jeff Van Gundy wanting to build a good team defense and a team defense that really is built on range and ground coverage and protecting all areas of the floor and providing value in gaps, Baba Miller could definitely be an additive player for them as a shot blocker, a helper, and also a weak side rebounder after shots come off the rim. Pick 35, the New York Knicks here now. Remember, they got this pick from the trade just a couple minutes ago with the Spurs after moving down from 31. So they're in a really nice spot to add a little bit of young talent. And with this selection, I have them taking guard Bruce Thornton from Ohio State. I think this is a really strong pickup for them. This season, they relied a bit on Jordan Clarkson as an off-the-bench scorer, creator type for them to a certain extent. And that's really the role that Bruce Thornton thrives in. A lot of green all over the shot chart for him at Ohio State, and he was doing that in a super high-volume creation role. And while Ohio State didn't have an elite season, came up short in the NCAA tournament against TCU, there was some real moments where Ohio State looked like a competent roster and team, and a lot of it I don't think was stemming from just solely the coaching or the overall congruency of the team, but from Bruce Thornton bailing them out of a lot of stuff. And I think for the Knicks, just more talent, more scoring punch would be very valuable for them. And I think just with his combination of shot making, perimeter shooting, he's not the highest three-point or rim volume player, but around other talented pieces like Karl Anthony Towns, around Jalen Brunson, maybe his shot die could alter and change a little bit over time, understanding that he doesn't have to be the hero or the savior for a team offense anymore. Instead, he can be a valuable piece into that. And I think in the NBA, that's where he could probably provide the best value. Now, he's a little bit small. There's going to be some challenges with the team defense if you put him next to Jalen Brunson, which is part of my concern and why he goes in the second round here in general. But Bruce Thornton, I think, a solid pickup for the Knicks now at 35. Back to the Clippers at 36. After taking Baba Miller at 34 just a couple picks ago, they're back on the clock now with another second-round pick here early on in the top 40. And I have them with this one selecting big man Malik Brown. And it's very hard to label him positionally because he is really a 5 in a 4's body because he doesn't have the elite positional size of a center, but he has the perimeter skill set of an inside big man, if I'm being very clear and transparent. For me, and for Clippers fans to best understand, this is forward version of Chris Dunn. This is a zero offense, high caliber defensive player. And that's a great thing. And this is the exact kind of player that, again, Jeff Van Gundy would love. Ty Lue would like this player. And I think, again, Malik Brown probably gets drafted in the top 45 for that exact reason. He is going to be, on an 82-game basis, a player that coaches love to play. He's going to have his own litany of flaws come playoff time. Teams are not going to respect him. You can sit him in the dunker spot. He's not a great athlete. He's not super functional there, but that's where you have to play him because he's only functional there. So, there's some real shortcomings for sure, but he carries a crazy steal rate and block rate for his position and size. He's super smart defensively. There's a reason he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year this past season. He's very, very good defensively. He's one of the 10 best prospects defensively in this draft, and that alone kind of sells you the reason why you would take him at number 36. Pick 37, we're back to Oklahoma City, and finally the time has come. For the last 3 years and change, I have thought about this guy as a potential two-way contract player for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and finally my moment is here. 37th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder select wing Otega-Oweh from Kentucky. Everything that Otega-Oweh does well on the court just screams OKC Thunder to me. He's a good athlete who's functional defensively, provides value in the gaps. He's very good at driving it. He knows when to shoot it. He's not the best three-point shooter by any stretch, but he's willing to take them and shoot them with confidence. And I think for OKC in general, with a lot of their questions about their payroll and questions about Lou Dort, his future with the team, Will they have to make some tough decisions about guys like Aaron Wiggins and Kenny Hustle over time? I think the answer to that clearly is yes. So it's about kind of replenishing the cupboard here as time goes on, finding young players who can fit the system and identity of this organization. And I feel like Otega-Oweh does that at a very high level as someone at Kentucky who was really stretched to be a primary creator for them at times, do a lot of stuff on the ball that he probably shouldn't have been doing. And I think in OKC, you're going to scale him down pretty significantly. He's going to be able to kind of carve out a small niche role for them, which is going to be a lot more additive for him and his success. And it's also going to be very good for OKC and their overall team style of play. Pick 38, we're back to the Bulls once again, who have had one of my favorite mock drafts so far with Caleb Wilson and Hannes Steinbach at 4 and 15 respectively. And now at 38, I have them selecting guard Jack Cale from Alba Berlin. And I think after making such big front court additions, it would be pretty clear that Chicago would come back and try and address their backcourt to some extent here. And Jack Cale's an interesting player with some solid positional size and really good playmaking feel. Boasted a well over 2-to-1 assist to turnover rate this past year for Alba Berlin. I think that's going to be the biggest selling point for him. Now, I do have concerns myself about his overall scoring gravity and how his game's going to be able to translate to the NBA athletically against some of the best in the world, and how his creation skills, like, is he more of just a floor general type than anything? But I think Chicago takes that kind of stab on him here. He has, of course, some real flashes of talent, and I do think the film itself is pretty good. But I just think, for the most part, we've seen this story a few times with international guards who maybe don't have the best combination of burst and body control, and sometimes they get to the league and their offense just dries up a little bit too much, whether it was Marcelo Huertas or Killian Hayes as a lottery example of that. There's just guards who have really good feel, really good processing skills, really good value in other areas of the game that it just doesn't maybe work in the league as much as it would in other international modes of play. And I think that's a little bit of my concern with Jack Cale, but there's definitely a player in here that's worth at least taking that stab on in the second round. Houston at number 39. Shout out to my Rockets fans watching this video. I'm kind of bummed that you guys haven't had a lot of mock draft content from me this year because you don't have a first round pick, but glad to be talking about Houston here now at 39, and I have them selecting guard Emmanuel Sharp from the University of Houston. So Rockets fans probably already know him pretty well. This is one of my favorite kind of under-the-radar players, and when you draft from the University of Houston, you draft from Kelvin Sampson's program, you're going to get guys who know how to compete, you're going to get players who know how to defend at a high level, and then you're going to get players who I think are built to impact winning in the NBA. We've seen that from someone like Jamal Shed a few years ago, who I absolutely loved in his draft class, had a first-round grade on him, has ended up providing very nice value for Toronto way down the board, and I think Emmanuel Sharp might be a similar story here as a guy who very lethal three-point shooter. I think that's a big reason why Houston would even consider him to start with, but then also kind of that nice strong physical frame. And just simply put, for Ime Udoka's offense, the more spacing you can put on the floor, the better for him. And I'm hoping we don't see more Josh Okogie going forward for the Rockets because, it's just the kind of player that Ime Udoka gravitates toward. Let's see if we can get a little bit more legitimate shooting on the court. And Emmanuel Sharp clearly is that from his time in college hoops. The Celtics at number 40 now. At 27, remember, they took the upside stab on Ibuka Corey. And now at number 40, I have them here selecting forward Dylan Mitchell from St. John's. This past year, they had brought in a couple of interesting players on minimum contracts. They'd taken a few stabs on certain guys, and one of them was Josh Minot from Minnesota, who I liked quite a bit. And I think Dylan Mitchell carries some of those similar athletic traits. A very interesting defender who can probably guard wings and a few forwards in the NBA. He's obviously super functional out of the dunker spot. He's a great leaper, a tremendous play finisher in transition. I think there is a lot of overlap between Minot and Mitchell, and now unfortunately the Celtics felt like they couldn't hold on to Minot, ended up moving off of him, and then Brooklyn scooped him up very quickly after. But maybe with Dylan Mitchell here, they can get him on a two-way contract after spending a second-round pick on him, control his rights for a little while, and then continue to kind of look for that archetype of player that can be a kind of nice spot player for them and someone who I think Mazzulla does a really nice job weaponizing the dunker spot in general, and sticking Dillon Mitchell down there could definitely provide some value for their offense, while also giving them a guy who can compete on defense with all of the length and athleticism that he possesses. I liked his game a lot back at Texas. I think he's taken significant strides forward since then, with a little bit of time at Cincinnati, and of course this past year with St. John's. And I'm hoping that, I'm kind of past the point of hoping that he ever develops a three-point shot, but really just hoping that he can lock in as a high-quality defensive player in the NBA, and then finding and carving out a role in that regard. Pick 41, the Miami Heat on the clock now. This is, of course, a super important pick for them, building up some of their team if they do make that mock trade I talked about earlier. And with this selection, I have them selecting guard Jacoby Gillespie out of Tennessee. And this just completely screams Miami Heat basketball to me. Jacoby Gillespie feels like an Eric Spoelstra type of player. Obviously, had a little bit of a downtick in overall efficiency from the year prior at Maryland to this past year at Tennessee. That's just kind of the MO and stamp for a Rick Barnes offense in general, is that your efficiency might go down a little bit in terms of your true shooting numbers. But for Miami here with Jacoby Gillespie, the biggest sell and the reason you take him is really the playmaking, the initiation, looking to kind of be a table setter for teams. He did a really nice job of that at Maryland around Derek Queen and Julian Reese a year ago. And then this past year for Tennessee, just controlling the basketball, limiting turnovers to a pretty fair extent, and then setting your team up for success in the half court. We've seen guys like Gabe Vincent find success doing that for Miami. We've seen a whole plethora of different options in a mock draft here where they traded away Kasparis Jakučionis. They traded away pick number 13, just going into the draft here in round 2 and using pick 41 to address a little bit of guard depth I thought was super important for them. They get a guard here who can definitely help compete toward winning moving forward. Pick 42, the New York Knicks. Again, this is that second pick that they got from moving down from number 31 in this draft. Another stab here in the second round to add a little bit of depth onto their roster. And with this pick, I have them taking wing Richie Saunders from BYU. And I think this is a really interesting draft and stash possibility. Now, he's a bit older. He's the oldest prospect in this draft, like just point blank simple, basically. But he's super interesting. He had some really high moments for BYU this past year. I always think back to that game against Kansas where AJ Dybantsa kind of no-showed against Darryn Peterson. But then BYU came roaring back in the second half, made the game really close with Peterson kind of sitting out the second half of that one. And Richie Saunders was really the big reason why. Felt like that was one of the best games of his college career. Unfortunately for him, his draft age and the fact that he tore his ACL is kind of the reason we see him available here 3/4 of the way through the draft at number 42. But for the Knicks, his shot-making talent's super impressive. He's a really good shooter. I think an intuitive cutter, someone who really knows how to play the game. Again, a little bit older because of the Mormon missionary thing, but I think for New York, it's a player that they'd be comfortable taking here, stashing for a little bit, and then hoping that 8 to 12 months from now, he's a player that they could count on giving them some value on a very cheap second-round contract. Trade alert here before going into pick number 43. The Pistons actually pick up number 43, and they leverage 2 second-round picks to do so. The Nets, who have a bunch of assets in general, on honestly too many in this draft to work with, they move out of this pick. They get a 2027 second from Detroit, and then a far-out 2032 second, kind of extending their asset control a little bit. And the Pistons highlight someone that they want to go in here for number 43 and get. And this is especially after trading away Isaiah Stewart in this mock draft. They're now on the clock here to address their forward/center spot a little bit. And I have them selecting forward/center Trevin Brazile from Arkansas, a big who shot it really well this past season for the Razorbacks for his career standards. I thought played very well around Darius Acuff Jr. and played off of Acuff's gravity a lot. And I think for Detroit, it's about getting another body here in the room. Now, I'm not expecting Trevin Brazile to be a 20-minute per game player for them. But I think with Paul Reed and Jalen Darryn kind of being the primary or prominent fixtures in their front court as centers, you're looking at Trevin Brazile kind of as a depth big man. They've found it valuable to address that in the draft here moving up to 43 to get this kind of player. Very athletic, obviously, kind of fits the athletic disposition that they've been looking to get on their roster with guys like Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland. Trevor Brazile, not quite that kind of athlete, but of course, when it comes to just pure vertical pop, he's unbelievable. Great above the rim finisher, runs the rim hard in transition consistently and routinely. And again, the shooting development and then the improvements defensively we've seen year over year from him are all kind of the reasons why I can actually legitimately see him as a worthwhile second-round pick in a draft where a lot of players withdrew from the draft in general. Pick 44, the Spurs back on the clock. Now you're probably seeing why they were willing to move 35 and 42 for 31, because they still have a second-round pick here. So picks 20, 31, and 44 in this mock draft today. And with this selection, I have the Spurs taking wing Tyler Nickel from Vanderbilt. And I feel like this was just a perfect mock draft for San Antonio. They get a high defensive upside big man earlier in the draft in Jaden Quaintance. At number 20, they come away at 31 with Alex Caravan. And then they get a capital S shooter in Tyler Nickel at number 44, a guy who understands how to play off the gravity of others, found a lot of success playing off of specifically Tyler Tanner for Vanderbilt this past year, but really that whole Vandy Commodores team was very, very talented. And Nickel was a really nice floor spacer for them, someone with legitimate range and then the ability to compete defensively too. I feel like he just perfectly emulates and fits this system of play for San Antonio. Not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but instead find a player who fits into the identity and then can be additive in their team context. And that's exactly what Tyler Nickel is for them moving forward. Pick 45, the Sacramento Kings on the clock now. And for Sacramento, after moving up for Darius Acuff Jr., they now have another second-round pick to at least add some depth onto their roster. And I have them taking forward/center Isaiah Nelson from South Florida. And I think specifically for them, it's about finding more athleticism, finding more rim finishing skills. One of the best things about Darius Acuff Jr. is his ability to push the pace in transition and throw lobs. And now they have a really great athlete in Isaiah Nelson, someone who had really impressive defensive metrics and numbers, jumps very, very well. He's a dominant rim finisher in the college game. And I think for Sacramento, you look at their offense right now, outside of Zach LaVine, they don't really have a whole bunch of great athletes. I think this is additive for them around Acuff going forward. Now, is it enough to really sway the short-term future of this team? Probably not. I think the Kings are still going to be one of the rougher teams over the next 2-3 years, even with Acuff, but you're taking meaningful steps forward long-term, and I hope Isaiah Nelson could be a guy that could catch on for them as a defensive infrastructural piece and then also a play finisher archetype. Of course, we're talking about the final 15-ish picks of the draft here, so it's not like these are franchise-defining decisions potentially, but it only takes one right decision to really help propel your team toward winning, and Isaiah Nelson, at least on paper, makes sense theoretically. Pick 46, Orlando. Every time I see this logo, man, I absolutely love it. I really like their new logo design. I know we haven't really gotten to talk about Orlando a ton this draft because of the Desmond Bane trade and all of the assets that they owed out the door for that, but pick 46 now, I have the Magic selecting guard Ryan Conwell from Louisville, a super high-volume three-point shooter for Pat Kelsey this past year. And I think for Orlando, just a team that's really desperate for more viable ball handling, more creation. Anthony Black going into the final year of his rookie contract. That's going to be maybe a point of contention long-term for them. There's a lot of things that Orlando has to figure out, and their cap table is not pretty, which is why I didn't love the Desmond Bane trade for them when they made it, even though I like Bane as an individual player a lot. Ryan Conwell can maybe be a short-term solution for this on either a two-way contract or a second-round exception signing contract. I think that he can help this team. He's a quality athlete, competes on defense, shoots it adequately well, and carried a lot of the burden when Mikel Brown Jr. went out this year for long stretches of time. Mikel missed double-digit games this past year for Louisville, missed the entire NCAA tournament, and I felt like Ryan Conwell was the guy that kind of stepped up and delivered for the most part in his absences. So Orlando gets a battle-tested guard here a little bit, someone who I think his skill set's kind of what they're looking for with pull-up shot making and just perimeter shooting in general, but also the kind of physical strength and frame. Last year they signed Javon Carter to address some of that, and I think Ryan Conwell is probably just a younger version of what they're trying to kind of fill the fringes of their roster with, and getting him here at 46 is quite solid. 47, the Phoenix Suns. there's been a lot of news in Phoenix. Re-signed Colin Gillespie to a very good contract, 4 years, 48. They re-signed Jordan Goodwin to a 3-year deal with a player option in the third year. That actually kind of surprised me that he had a player option in his contract. And then Devin Booker changes his number from 1 to 15. That's maybe the most pressing news of the offseason, of course. Jersey number switches, but rip to anyone who owned the jersey. But 47th here, I have the Phoenix Suns selecting wing Darryn Williams from NC State. Now, I really like what the Suns have in their front court going forward. Osei Guedaro was a solid pickup for them and late in the second round when they got him. Obviously had a really nice season this past year in their new system. Then you look at, of course, Kaman Maluach, who I liked a lot in his draft class. And then also Mark Williams, who they have restricted free agency rights on. So I didn't really want to address a big man. Feels like their backcourt's kind of set. So I did want to find someone on the wing here. Grayson Allen could possibly get traded. Royce O'Neal would be another name to possibly watch in a trade. But I love Dylan Brooks. And I thought Darryn Williams is an interesting player here for me. He had kind of a rough season at NC State with Will Wade. But the year prior at Texas Tech really shined as kind of a secondary initiator, secondary creator, a real tight leverage passer for the Red Raiders around Christian Anderson and JT Toppin. And I feel like for Phoenix, with more of a spread court and a little bit more above the rim finishing talent than what NC State had, maybe some of that playmaking could become valuable on full display around those guys. So I wanted to include him here in my second round mock just because I think there's some meaningful skill in there. There's a little bit of dribble, pass, shoot talent. And that alone should get him at least some looks in the second round, although I could definitely see him going undrafted. But I liked Phoenix as a possible destination for him at 47. 48, back to the Dallas Mavericks now, who have taken Brayden Burries and Zuby Ejiofor in this mock draft so far. And at number 48, I have them taking guard Jaden Bradley out of Arizona. So kind of a fun storyline here. Brayden Burries and Jaden Bradley reunited in the NBA, going from Arizona to Dallas, and Jaden Bradley, I think, is a really solid player. Big 12 Player of the Year, of course, very productive for them, and I think over the course of his college career has really matured his game, and I think the combine scrimmages were such a great example of this, where he understood, hey, the best bet for my NBA career is probably being more functional as a table setter instead of a downhill drive and kick, look to score it type of player. And his college career matured over time in that regard, from where he started at Alabama to where he finished his career at Arizona. He's kind of a real, just solid point guard for them, and shot the ball really well from three this past season. I could definitely see him impressing in individual workouts, and I think there's going to be some teams that have him top 40, top 35 on their final big boards when it's all said and done. Now, the guard position is always kind of difficult to find and carve into, because you even see guys like last year Ryan Nembhard who don't get valued as much because of size or because of the kind of positional wall that you're trying to break into. But Jaden Bradley's been a really good college player for a while now, and I think could definitely stick in the NBA. He's got the athletic traits, and I think has taken meaningful steps forward offensively in terms of what his style of play needed to be to find success in the NBA. 49, the Denver Nuggets now on the clock. They took Isaiah Evans earlier at 26, and at 49, I have them here selecting center Ugonna Onyenso from Virginia. Very fascinating player. The highest block rate of all players in this mock draft today. 17% block rate. 17.3% block rate, actually. Just kind of a gimmick on defense, because there's no defensive 3 seconds in college basketball, so he kind of just camped at the rim in his zone all of the time. But he's long, and he's got really incredible shot block timing. And that alone is going to be valuable. And I think for Denver, it's really impossible to watch them play and not notice, teams aren't afraid of them at the rim at all. They don't have any rim deterrence. Of course, Nikola Jokic is the primary culprit of that, but then subbing in Jonas Valanciunas doesn't help with that either. And I think drafting Ugonna Onyenso is kind of a bench alteration that they just haven't had around Jokic, a guy who can legitimately stuff shots at the rim. And while there's things that are going to be challenges for him offensively, I don't know if he's good enough to really provide value in the NBA consistently. Defensively, there's, again, the gimmick aspect of it, where defending out in space in the NBA is a lot harder than it is sitting in a zone in college. But for Onyenso, I think this is the first time in a while the Nuggets have had a legit shot blocker, and I think that should be a sight for sore eyes there in the Mile High City. Pick 50, the Raptors back on the clock now at 19, they took Christian Anderson out of Texas Tech. And at number 50, I have them selecting forward Tyler Bilodeau from UCLA. I know how much Raptors fans love Sandro Mamukelashvili. And I thought Tyler Bilodeau, not really the exact same player, but the functionality of a play-finishing shot maker like that is something that is very, very useful for Toronto. They're probably going to be moving off of Grady Dick this offseason, if I had to guess. We'll see what happens with Jakob Poeltl, but getting someone who can shoot it the way that Bilodeau does from all over the court, very efficient three-point shooter, especially with respectable volume. It's an interesting kind of stash and develop player here who probably spends a good amount of time with the Raptors 905 program. But just in terms of evolving and improving Toronto's offense, the more catch and shot make diet that they have, the better. We've seen a variety of players kind of stick in Toronto for that exact reason. Specifically Minnesota Gopher legend too. So Raptors fans know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to keep it niche there just so we don't give it away to people who maybe don't know who I'm talking about. But Raptors fans, you know who I'm talking about there. Had some interesting season games this past year, played very well for stretches. So getting Tyler Bilodeau as a shooter would be, I think, pretty valuable for this team as well. Washington here at number 51. I have the Wizards after taking AJ Dybantsa first overall in this mock. Now with 2 picks in the final 10, selecting, first of all, Kadir Copeland from NC State. Super dynamic athlete. Another NC State Wolfpack member to come off the board here. And for Copeland specifically, he's a fun story because he followed Will Wade from McNeese State out to NC State. Now, unfortunately, won't be following him to LSU. Well, actually, hold on, brakes on that. You never know because LSU and Will Wade have been doing a great job getting 26, 25, 28-year-olds to play more college basketball. It's a very impressive strategy to compete against 22, 21-year-olds is by getting 25, 26-year-olds. It's a bold strategy, but it's working for them. You never say never. Kadir Copeland could be back with Will Wade, just knowing how the NCAA's operate about some of these things. But for Copeland here specifically, he'd be a really nice addition for Washington because of his drive and kick prowess, and also just his downhill ability. He's a super high leverage facilitator, carried a super high assist rate, but also very downhill oriented in his attack. So for Washington, who has Trae Young and Bub Carrington kind of right now in their backcourt, presumably Trey Johnson, they already got a big-time downhill threat in AJ Dybantsa in this draft, but Kadir Copeland's a guy that I think would be really nice for them to add here this late in the draft as well. Pick 52, the Clippers on the board. Once again, this is their 4th pick in the draft here, and with this selection, I have them taking guard Kylan Boswell. We've obviously been very focused in the second round here of adding to their team defense and their front court and length and identity. But Boswell can be someone who's additive to their team defensive identity from the point of attack. He's got big, broad shoulders. He's physically strong. And did a lot of the heavy lifting defensively for Illinois at the point of attack next to Jake Davis as well. And for Illinois, they had a lot of offensive talent with Mirkovic and Wagler, and Andrej Stojakovic, of course. The Balkan beasts, so to speak. Kylan Boswell has been kind of the unsung hero a little bit for them. Not really my favorite player in the draft by any stretch, but a guy who competed at a high level, started his career down in the Southwest, transferred to the Illini in the Big Ten, and gave them some really productive seasons there for head coach Brett Underwood before making his transition to the NBA now, where the Clippers pick him up at 52. 53, the Rockets back on the clock once again after having picked 39 earlier. At 53 now, I have Houston taking guard Brayden Smith from Purdue. So Emmanuel Sharp and Brayden Smith in the second round here, very guard-oriented, as you can tell, for Houston. They have a big question about RFA Tari Eason this offseason, who I'm hoping that they keep. They'll find a way, hopefully, to make the money work there. But Brayden Smith is a really solid pickup for Houston this late in the draft. And obviously, you can tell, the size, the athletic traits, all of that stuff's going to limit where his draft range is, and that's just very clear. But from an actual skill set perspective, and just really the passing component of the game, this is very likely the best passer in the draft. There's a reason he's the all-time leader in college assists. He is unbelievably savvy and smart. He's the best short roll passer in the entire draft when it comes to actually getting the ball to short rollers. I think there'd be unbelievable synergy between he and Alperen Şengün. and he's comfortable with the ball in the face of pressure, and that's something you can't say about most of Houston's team outside of Fred VanVleet. So for that reason alone, it's additive. Now, Ime Udoka would probably be rolling over in his grave seeing a 5'9", 5'10" point guard at the point of attack defensively. So that's going to be something that will limit Houston's willingness to even do something like that probably. But at some point, Houston has to wake up and realize, like, hey, we need guys who can initiate offense and make it so that our offense isn't just reliant on missing a first shot so that we can rebound and try and score the second one. That's kind of really what it's been so far for them. When Steven Adams went out, their offense completely crumbled because of that. And, they just need someone who's a better table setter, and Brayden Smith is that to a T in this year's draft. Number 54, the Golden State Warriors here. Now, of course, they've picked Yaxel Lendeborg earlier in this mock at 11, and at 54, I have them taking forward Trey Kaufman-Renn from Purdue. Another guy with very high feel, really functional in the short roll. He was the guy that was paying off a lot of those passes from Brayden Smith into that short roll pocket area. And I think for Golden State in general, obviously Curry gets blitzed a ton. Draymond Green's found so much success himself in the middle of the floor. But Trey Kaufman-Renn does a little bit differently. He has a little bit of that playmaking juice out of the middle of the court, but really it's that float game for him. He's got floater that can extend out to 15, 16, 17 feet. Very good in that 12 to 14-foot range too with that shot. And that's a real weapon. And next to Porzingis and with how rim-oriented team defenses are, being able to get that push shot off consistently really good. I think TKR is a guy that's been super underrated by a majority of NBA draft media. I think, it's not like he's top 30 on my board or anything, but I definitely think he could ward a second-round pick and would be nice and additive for a team like Golden State, who has such an awesome three-point shooter in Steph Curry that can consistently get Kaufman-Renn the ball kind of in the middle of the floor in either a playmaking position or in that little floater range that he likes to score from. Pick 55 here now. Sorry for the typo here on this Knicks graphic, but with this selection, I have them taking guard Duke Miles from Vanderbilt. Again, just making more additions into the depth of their roster. You think about Deuce McBride and the role that he's played for this team. Duke Miles is an awesome, awesome college player. Now, again, he's limited in his size and played in a kind of context where he wasn't on the ball a ton at Vanderbilt, but handles it a little bit. Like, this is the exact kind of archetype that Deuce McBride is to a certain extent. Not probably quite as shifty or quick with the ball, not quite the pull-up shooter, but it's a lesser version of that. And I think for New York, again, you're just trying to find bodies onto your roster. That's going to be really the biggest thing. They have a super expensive starting five, so you need players who can play in a pinch, and what better to do than find guys who are really great as college pieces around talent. And Duke Miles is a guy who's bounced around. He's been a part of a bunch of different systems. It's kind of the MO poster boy of the transfer portal era and the value of NIL, because he's been around. He knows how to win. He knows how to impact winning. And I think for the Knicks here at 55 could definitely provide some value for them this late in the draft. Pick 56, the Chicago Bulls. Here now, and I think for Chicago, this is their fourth pick of the draft, of course, having made a few high leverage picks earlier on. This selection, I have them taking another big, Graham Ike here from Gonzaga, and just mostly looking at trying to address that front court depth standpoint. Now, is Ike ever going to be a 25, 30-minute per game player in the NBA? Probably not. I'm not going to try and sell you this pen here on every single prospect in the final 5 or so picks, but I do think, as a guy that at least is a body into your front court, cheap, two-way contract, probably more than likely for him here for Chicago. Pick 57, the Atlanta Hawks now on the clock once again. They've been active in this mock draft, and I have them taking Noam Yaakov from Israel here at 57. Kind of a stab on a player with really interesting positional feel and playmaking, and I think from a draft and stash component, which is very possible or likely here, they can kind of wait and see on him. They've obviously taken Kingston Flemings. They've kind of addressed that lead guard spot, but this gives them some long-term optionality on a player that if they do bring in here, they could play with the Skyhawks for a while and give him a greater role and opportunity on the basketball to continue developing. But at the very worst case, you're just holding on to his draft rights, keeping some of your roster flexibility open, keeping some of your trade flexibility open, and then in a year or two from now kind of reevaluating the overall situation. kind of like what we talked about earlier with the De La Rhea pick. Pick 58, the Pelicans, now on the clock for the first time. And with this selection, I have them taking wing Fletcher Loyer from Purdue. One of the biggest issues for New Orleans, and there was a heavy host of them, but one of the biggest issues was how they shot the ball this past year. Not a lot of three-point volume, not a lot of three-point success. And while Fletcher Loyer has significant limitations in his all-around game, the one thing you know he's going to be able to do is step on the court and take and make three-pointers. And that's exactly what he's bringing here for New Orleans. Now, I would be surprised if he's anything more than a spot minutes player for stretches of time early in his career. But you think back to a guy like Matt Ryan, who was kind of lightning in a bottle for small stretches early in his NBA career. Fletcher Loyer's got a really great track record of success. I think even more reliable three-point shooter than Matt Ryan was. And I think for that reason, with his okay, respectable positional size, his kind of proposition toward winning over the last few years with Purdue, you could definitely see Fletcher Loyer maybe hear his name called toward the end of the second round, or at the very least be a high priority UDFA for a team following the draft. Pick 59, the Minnesota Timberwolves on the clock once again, and with this selection, I have them taking guard Tamin Lipsey from Iowa State. Earlier, I talked about the fact that they were sniffing around point guards a little bit, working out Labaron Philon, and Lipsey, while there are some real offensive limitations for him as a scorer, I think he can definitely step in and be kind of a floor general initiator type for them, which is valuable for Chris Finch. I think having an on-court cerebral point guard like Lipsey who can get you into sets, get you into actions, super, super useful for specifically Minnesota around Anthony Edwards, around Julius Randle, around Rudy Gobert. If there's more of the kind of same old in Minnesota, having a player like this who kind of has that cerebral feel for the game, really high playmaking caliber, with over a 30% assist rate this past year for the Cyclones. This is the type of guy that would be sensible for Minnesota to possibly eye at 59. And then at 60, the final pick here of the draft. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the full 2-round mock draft. I have the Washington Wizards here at this spot, their third pick of the draft, selecting center Rafael Castro from George Washington. And Castro is an interesting player. Bounced around a little bit, started at Providence for a short bit of time. And for the Wizards here in general, I specifically think you're looking at front court depth. Last year they signed Julian Reese toward the end of the season. He gave them some, I wouldn't say valuable minutes, but he gave them some minutes. He played pretty well in his minutes. I'm not trying to discredit Julian Reese by any stretch. I'm just pointing to the fact that the Wizards weren't playing a lot of valuable minutes toward the end of the season. But I think you're just looking for size and strength and rebounding, and those are kind of the things that Rafael Castro, at least from the surface, is going to theoretically provide for you. Not that he's going to ever be a 25, 30-minute per game player probably for Washington, if we're being completely transparent and honest. Thank you all so much for watching. I can't believe that the draft is here already. It's crazy. We're a day away from the time that this video comes out. So again, thank you all so much for watching. Really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.